Good, Kent. Okay, we'll call the regular meeting of council for Monday, August 10th, order at 3 p.m. Adoption of the agenda. I will ask for a motion from Councillor Masterman that council adopt the agenda for the regular meeting of council August 10th as amended to include the addition of the Southwest Dyke and 12th Avenue land purchase.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor by consensus? Carried. Adoption of minutes. Ask for a motion from Councillor McMillan that council adopt the minutes for the special meeting of council from June 22nd as presented.
I'll make that motion.
Question, comments? All in favor? Carried. Ask for a motion from Councillor Cooey that council adopt the minutes from the special meeting of July 8th as presented.
I will make that motion.
All in favor? Carried. And minutes from the regular meeting, ask for a motion from Councillor Nychuk that council adopt the minutes from the regular meeting of council from July 13th as presented.
I'll make that motion for you, Mr. Mayor.
All in favor? Carried. Public comments. Kara, I understand there are no public comments.
That is correct.
Thank you. Strategic priorities chart for information only. Is there any questions from council for Chris? We'll move on. First bylaw, public notification bylaw. Kara?
Councillor McMillan had a question.
Oh, sorry. Where's the hands? Gotcha. I'm looking for orange hands this time, Carol. Sorry.
That's okay. I just had a question, two questions. What's a business readiness review?
So the business readiness review came out of our conversation on community development in February, and it was identifying the fact that our operations here need to be ready for any incoming business that may want to come into town to establish themselves, about proper information, what properties are available, and developing a package of information of who to contact for properties that may be for sale, industrial or commercial.
Okay, thank you. And then under the parking lot, what's the teleworking policy?
That is in response to the COVID pandemic right now, is developing a clear-cut policy of when teleworking will kick in, what staff are available to that, and the parameters and rules associated with that, so that there's clear guidelines for staff to utilize teleworking.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Okay, back to you, Kara, on the public notification bylaw, please.
Awesome. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The bylaw before you today is the public notification bylaw. Under the Municipal Government Act, Council has the authority to pass an advertising bylaw that provides methods for advertising proposed bylaws, resolutions, public hearings, and meetings. The proposed bylaw seeks to integrate the use of digital technologies such as the town's website and social media for advertising in addition to the town crier, so that the notification will reach a broader audience. Given that the town already utilizes its website and social media platforms, it's not actually anticipated that there will be any additional financial impact as a result of this proposed bylaw. The general impact for the community is positive in the sense that the greater community will be better informed and more aware of the items such as public hearings going on in advance and how they can provide their input into that public process. Organizationally, this bylaw would be positive in that it would standardize the advertising requirements across the organization. Administration is recommending first reading today, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Let's see, any questions other than one question, Kara.
Yes.
Notifications tendering town of High River projects. would this be part of that? Like any changes as to how we do a tender on a?
So this is specifically in relation to the items that are covered under the MGA. In terms of processes for tendering, I think we could deal with that possibly under a policy in terms of how we manage that process.
Okay.
So probably our procurement policy. Maybe I'll let Chris jump in if he feels that might be a more appropriate one.
That's the thing. There is a defined way that we have to tender our projects, so that people know what we're doing if they're interested in bidding on those projects, right? So
that's correct. Mayor Snodgrass. There is a process outlined in our purchasing policy that we have currently. It's dated, mind you, and needs a significant rewrite. But it is spelled out within that, as well as we're bound by certain trade agreements over certain thresholds that are national and international trade agreements that we have to abide by as well to ensure that they're posted on certain sites.
Okay,
so that
perfect.
International corporations have access to it.
Okay, that's all I had. Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Quick question, Kara. When we talk about social media, are we talking about the best trending social media sites? Young people tend to use Instagram. Older people, middle to older, tend to use Facebook. Are we looking at multiple platforms or single platforms? Just a question on the media side. Thank you.
That's a really great question. So we've really tried to leave the language in the bylaw to be a bit more broad in the sense of the town's official social media platforms, because social media changes so rapidly that we didn't want to be so specific as to say only Facebook or only this, right? And so depending on how the town changes and moves in terms of which social media platforms we use, that's how we want to move forward. So if we are using Instagram as an official one, then we are recommending that.
Thank you.
I think if we can implement the Councillor Nychuk, we'll now be doing interpretive dance on pretty much everything via TikTok. Plug that one in there. No further questions. Ask for a motion from Councillor Moore that council give first reading to bylaw 4577/2020, being the public notification bylaw, and the council direct administration to schedule a public hearing for the public notification bylaw for September 14th, 2020 at 3 p.m.
I will make that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor by a consensus? Motion is carried. Thanks, Kara. AUMA.
So the next two items, the AUMA and the letter of support for West Winds, both of these are follow-up reports, just looking for council to ratify the direction that council's provided. So with AUMA, it was in relation to seconding the 2020 resolution. And for the letter of support was to authorize the letter of support in regards to West Winds for the Minister of Seniors and Housing's nominations.
Okay. So we'll deal with the AUMA one first. And just a little bit of background, this is work that we've been doing through the Calgary Metropolitan Region Board as well. But currently Alberta has by far the lowest flood design standards in the country. We're at 1 in 100. There's a few provinces that are at 1 in 500. But at a minimum, the other provinces are at 1 in 200, and we should actually be above that. But we'll take baby steps here while we go through this. So with CMRB, we've been pushing very hard to try to get better design standards for these events when we're designing our community. So Town of Okotoks got on board with this in a way outside of CMRB, because it is to do it properly, it does need to be a law through design standards through the province. So the Town of Okotoks has put a motion forward to go through to Alberta Urban Municipalities Association to increase the flood design standards and from 1 in 100 to 1 in 200. So I'm going to adjust this motion just slightly because I'd like to have those numbers in this as to what we're doing, even though it is in the main motion from Okotoks that we are seconding. I do think it's important that we say outright what we're actually doing. So I will ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that Council ratify its decision to second the 2020 Alberta Urban Municipalities Association resolution regarding the revised standard in relation to flood mitigation, flood mapping, and design standards from 1 in 100 to 1 in 200 in the province of Alberta.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. It is with great pleasure that I give you that motion to take forward to the AUMA.
Thank you. All in favor? Consensus? Carried. Thank you very much. Letter of support for West Winds. Do you want to speak to this at all, Carol, or pretty self-explanatory?
Sure, I can just speak briefly to it. The Seniors Ministry Awards is specifically this year kind of gauged around COVID and how seniors housing has been dealing with things. So the West Winds Board is happily nominating West Winds communities for their exemplary level of proactive care and well-being of all of their seniors, as well as in all of their housing. It's not just about seniors, because they still have remained COVID-free, no positive cases, and it's largely because of just their tremendous team and great efforts. So we're very honored to nominate them.
Well done. They committed to it and they're successful because of it. So I'll ask for a motion from Councillor McMillan that Council ratify its decision regarding the execution of the attached letter of support by the Mayor, and that Council direct administration to refer the development of a letter of support policy to a committee of the whole meeting for further discussion.
I'll give you that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Consensus? Motion is carried. Youth Park Task Force.
Well, good afternoon, Mary.
Oh, hi.
Oh, hi. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you about the Youth Park Task Force this afternoon. As you would have seen in your package, on July 14th, 2020, the High River United Way Partnership sent a letter formally requesting your support in allowing them to create a Youth Park Task Force. This task force would help us explore potential enhancements to amenities located at 1204 10th Avenue Southeast, or that might be more easily recognized as the High River Mini Putt and High River Skate Park area. The High River United Way Partnership has been in receipt of a substantial gift in 2018 from an estate that totals $200,000. It was the decision of the partnership committee to utilize these one-time funds for a legacy project. The committee has explored a variety of options, and their ultimate desire is to invest these funds at this potential youth park. Now, this aligns in two different ways. They have said investing in youth aligns with the mandate of the United Way, but as you know, investing in youth aligns also with the town's strategic plan. So the formation of this Youth Park Task Force will allow for an inclusive process that's going to combine some outreach, some community engagement, specifically with our youth, so that they can create an overall proposal for your consideration that's reflective of youth's desires for that particular area. So the recommendation in front of Council today that's supported by administration is that Council authorize the formation of a Youth Park Task Force that includes representatives from the High River United Way Partnership, High River Youth, the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Foothills, and this is ultimately to prepare and put forward this plan for the development of the park area at 1204 10th Avenue Southeast. Any questions from Mayor and Council?
Thanks, Janelle. Councillor Masterman.
Thank you. Sorry, Mayor Snodgrass. Yeah, thanks for the report. I just had a really quick question, and maybe it's a question that is impossible to answer, but $200,000 sounds like a lot of money. Is it enough to do to really make a difference out there?
Well, I think that's what's so excellent about this concept of creating a task force, because I think that they'll have the opportunity to actually explore what are the wants for the area, and then how can they leverage the funds. So if it turns out that they needed $500,000, would they look at trying to find matching grants, or would they look at saying, hey, this is phase one, we can afford phase one for now. Maybe phase two, phase three comes at a later time when more funds can be found. So is $200,000, you're right, sounds like a lot, but that's what the task force will help do, is put together a realistic plan for those dollars.
Thank you, Janelle.
And just to be clear, Janelle, doing this helps us kind of open the door to really look at what that place could be, which means maybe changing it from a putt-putt.
Maybe, but what if the youth decide that a putt-putt is what they want and it just needs some enhancements to the space?
Well, that's fine. As long as I actually see a human being on it, that'll be great.
Helps when the gates are open.
Perfect. Thanks, Janelle.
Thank you.
Oh, I got a couple more. Carol, sorry.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. And thank you very much for your presentation, Janelle. I hope you've had a great summer. And this really excites me because I love public engagement and to actually hear from the youth. I am really looking forward to what this task force comes back with. But this is just fantastic. And I love how it's in alignment with our strategic plan. So great job.
Thank you. I think it's important to mention that there are some very excited individuals from the United Way committee, as well as Amanda King, as you know, as our youth liaison worker, who is exceptional at rallying youth around different projects and ideas. So I think it has some pretty cool potential.
Oh, fabulous. Thank you.
Bruce, your hand is still up. Are you still good to go? Nope. Okay. So I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Masterman. The council authorized the formation of a youth park task force that includes representatives from High River United Way Partnership, High River Youth, and the Boys and Girls Club of the Foothills to prepare and put forward a plan for the development of the park area at 1204 10th Avenue Southeast.
I'll make that motion, Mayor Snodgrass.
Thank you. All in favor? Consensus? Carried. Curling Club.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I will be presenting you today. Unfortunately, we don't have Darlene. We're having some technical difficulties getting her on the call here, but that's okay. I will present and we'll go from there. The curling agreement is currently expired. It expired this summer, so it's time to be renewed. A new agreement ensures proper usage of the facility and is a benefit both to the Curling Association as well as us. This is a little different in that it is a lease of space, where typically we're doing more like user agreements like with minor hockey. So this is a little different in terms of they're basically given an area of our building under a lease. Financially, what is being proposed by administration is $31,400 per season, which is the same rate they were charged last year, so no increase for this year. A large portion of that rate is actually made up of utilities. The ice plant uses, I think, 45% of all electricity in that facility, and a lot of that is for curling, and so it is quite expensive to maintain an ice surface in that building. Curling did raise some concerns around the condition of the ice slab, so the concrete slab the ice sits on, and we did have an assessment done, which is included in your package. They basically concluded that it was end of life and we should start looking at replacement here in the very near future. There are some costs associated with that as well, depending on which surface we're looking at. So all three surfaces had assessments done. Also in your package is a letter from the curling club in terms of what they would like to see. They were again concerned about the condition of the slab and felt that it merited some discussion with regards to either a reduction or waiving of the lease fees. That does pose some concern with administration in terms of how that looks to other user groups, because other user groups use our other services which have condition issues as well, such as the large arena. Again, that's still a little bit different because they are user groups and not actually leasing the space. So it is a bit of a different situation regardless. And with that, I'll be happy to take any questions. This isn't for an agreement right now. This is just to kind of get direction in terms of going into those agreements we've discussed with curling already, and largely both sides are happy with the old agreement in terms of how the facility was ran. The main one being issues being the condition of the slab and the yearly rate.
Thanks, Riley. Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. In terms of that annual rate, Riley, I know the curling club had come to me and proposed that there be some consideration given for a reduced rate, and mainly on the points that you stated already, that the condition of the rink is in distress, and the uncertainty with COVID happening about access to the facility. Was any of that discussion taken on with them? Was there any negotiating back and forth, or is there consideration to that? Because apparently they've not been able to use the facility for some events that would raise funds for that club, being provincial playdowns, things like that. So any comment to that lease fee and any considerations?
So last time they ran a tournament, we did let them, they actually rented the large arena. And so with regards to not being able to run tournaments, I'd want a further conversation on that, because like I said, last time they did use the large arena, and I believe their own curling facility was more of a kind of a practice surface. In terms of the rate, we did discuss the rate, and it was kind of the same discussion we're having here. We expressed concerns over covering costs, setting precedent with other user groups, our utilities alone, and they're like you said, struggling with membership, struggling with attracting events because it's not available. And it was really, there was no negotiation at that point. It was really just kind of, what's your position? Here's our position, and then we're going to take this to council for direction so we can continue this conversation.
Okay, so we're still moving ahead with that kind of discussion with them then, is what I.
Yeah, this is early days, like this is, and I think we might actually be the first one in terms of, the intent is to always ask council in terms of the direction before entering into these agreements, rather than coming to council with basically an agreement that's ready for signing, because at that point it's very hard to have any input or be able to change the agreement at that point. So trying to get an early conversation for direction.
Have we, I'm going to throw this out there, have we ever thought to formulate the agreement differently in terms of leasing the space for $1 or whatever, like some of these other facilities we do with other organizations, and then having them take care of the utilities portion? So that just becomes their expenditure. It's not tied in through a lease agreement. So the lease is actually the facility. The expenditures to operate the facility then become part and parcel of what the curling club has to look after. I know, just another way to skin a cat, I suppose. Eh? Oh, pardon that expression for the cat lovers. Okay.
No, that would, it's not metered separately, but I'm sure we could come up with kind of a formula of some sort that would apportion it fairly. That's not something we've discussed, but yeah, we could throw it out there.
Thanks, that's all I got.
That was discussed back when I was on the board 20 years ago, Mike, with the curling club, is to try to break those utilities out, so that, because there's always distinction as to who's paying and who's subsidizing who, right? And it's difficult in that building. It can be done, but there's a cost to re-meter everybody to put them on.
Sorry, Mike, I forgot one of your questions in terms of how we're handling them with COVID and being able to use the facility. So they've been in and out of the facility when they've needed to be, because they have an office in there. So we've made arrangements to let them in when they need to be on that. And I would expect that if they are unable to use the facility, we would change their rate accordingly. So kind of if they have use of their facility, they get charged full rate. If they don't have use of the facility, then we would factor that in. I think that's how we've been treating most groups.
Thanks, Riley.
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you. And thanks, Riley. I have to say, I really like Councillor Nychuk's idea about looking at the agreement a little bit differently, as well as I'm happy to hear that you're thinking about the fact that they haven't had full use. I guess one thing I was just wondering if I misread, I thought last year they were charged $30,300 and not the $31,400. Did I misread that?
Oh, I wish I had Darlene online. That might have been, I don't want to guess, Carol. I'll have to get back to you on that one. I suspect it's the 3% increase, but I'll have to get back to you on the 30,000.
Okay, because I guess just a little bit of my concern, and I know it doesn't maybe seem that much, but I just kind of thought in light of what's happened in 2020 to put at.
Because the last agreement, I believe, was 3 years and there were increases on some of those years. And so I suspect that's what the difference we're seeing.
Right. And I guess I would just kind of put it out there that why increase it to 2020 when they're not getting their full use, and kind of explore more of an innovative agreement that Michael mentioned. Just
so I can confirm the 31,400 is what we charged them last year.
Was it?
And so we were proposing to hold it the same. So no increase.
Oh, so there isn't an increase then?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think what you're seeing is a previous year's increase, not this year's increase, because this year we're holding it because you look at the market and construction indexes and consumer indexes, there's not a lot of increase out there. So.
Right. Well, I'm reading that report too. I mean, it really is in rough shape, like just, yeah. So.
Yes, it is.
And those pictures were quite graphic.
Yeah.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor. Riley, with respect to the report, have we offered this report up to the 3 user groups just so that they have an idea of what we're facing as a council going forward? We're talking some pretty significant dollars for both.
No, we have not. They'll of course have access to them now because they're now public documents. We were holding on to them until today because we wanted to have this conversation with council first rather than letting the user groups have them first. So it was really about how the progression of the release, and council should always see it first.
Yeah, so we're free to share it with them now then?
Oh, for sure. It was in the agenda. It's a public document. If they ask for us, we'll email them the PDFs directly now.
Excellent, thank you.
So I'm gonna take a little different look at this for a second, then we'll go to Bruce. But the slab issue has been something that's been plaguing that club for well over 20 years, and it's always been the low-hanging fruit for council on a budgetary item to push it off, and we keep doing that, right? And it just continues to get worse and worse and worse. And I'm questioning, you know, the tournament that they lost last year. Some curling tournaments can be held in the curling club. Others must have arena ice. You can't just take every tournament and put it over onto the large ice surface. Some can just be held without problem in the curling club, but not if the ice is like this. So, you know, I'm questioning us charging them a full rate right now of the 31,400 when we're not delivering a very good product for that rate. any of us that would be leasing a house or renting a house or anything, if the floor started to sink on it, you wouldn't want to be paying full rent anymore. So I'm just looking at, whether it be business-wise or however, or fairness, that, you've got a product that we are delivering and charging somebody money for that isn't quite worth what we're charging, maybe. So I'd challenge that as to, I don't know that 0 is fair. I don't want this to be precedent setting, because I do not believe in setting precedent with any other group. You look at each group and what their needs are, and you assess them, and you say yes or no. There's no precedent that I did it for this guy, so I must do it for that guy. I'm going down that road. This one needs some work, and I honestly, I want to see a commitment from us that we are actually going to deal with this slab. It's great to have the report, all of that, but nothing matters until you put the budgetary line item to it that we're going to deal with it. And until I see that, I can't support this motion as written with mutually agreed upon at the cost of 31,400. I just can't do it. So that's where I'm at. Bruce, did you have your hand up? Or you're okay? Good. No other hands, so I will ask Councillor Cooey for a motion that council authorize administration to negotiate a community facility lease agreement with the Highwood Curling Club for the occupancy and operation of the curling facility located, we know where it is, with an option to renew for an additional term as mutually agreed upon at a cost of $31,400 per season with a maximum 3% increase per year. Councillor Cooey, with that motion, please.
I will give you that motion.
Mayor Snodgrass, can I just ask a question?
Absolutely, yep.
And I now know the motion is on the table, however, but I was just wondering about maybe, well, I guess the motion can go on, but then I guess I'm just a little bit confused at why we didn't give a little bit more, if you're against, per se, a little bit more direction to administration about the negotiating.
That's only me against right now. So if anybody wants to do an amendment to the motion, whether it be the number or wording, we can absolutely do that.
Because what I was kind of wondering is perhaps not even putting a number in at all until negotiating. I'm not sure.
Okay. Let me just look at this for a second. Let's go to, leave that with me for a second, Carol, and let's go to Councillor Cooey first.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I was just of the similar mindset because we obviously don't want to defeat this motion and table this. We want it to be able to move forward. So just wondering how we could amend the motion to maybe allow for some negotiation if the majority of council feels that maybe the full rate is not fair, allowing Darlene to have some flexibility in her negotiation moving forward.
So one thing, an easy amendment we could do would just to amend this motion ending at the word following for a term of 2 years, period. And that just allows them to negotiate a community facility lease agreement. And then they'll come back to us with the with what it actually looks like. That keeps I think it's important to keep the 2 years thing in there right now. I think a timeline's good. But the renewal and the dollar factor and the percentage of increase could all be part of the negotiation that's going to come back to us anyways, but just to kind of leave it open, right?
Mayor Snodgrass?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to propose a friendly amendment And that is that we do put in a dollar value, but put it in as simply what the cost of the utilities are as calculated by administration for the next 2 years. So at least we get our utility costs covered.
I'll go back to that utility thing. How easy is it for you to break out that utility number? I just don't, right now, Jamie, if we can just leave it as a negotiation right now and let these guys talk about it without, because the utility thing, it's hard to separate right now as to who's paying what.
Yeah, I think we have to have something in place relatively quick though, don't we, Riley?
Oh, sorry, I'm already unmuted. Yeah, I guess in terms of starting up the season, it'd be nice to have that agreement in place and moving out. I don't think.
Well, they can start the season. We're not going to kick them out.
Yeah.
Right.
We'd have to find some sort of interim, basically an MOU or something to make sure they have their insurance or whatnot while we negotiate, but we could accommodate that somehow.
I'll move to Chris for your feedback just right now, and then.
Mayor Snodgrass, what I would recommend is changing a couple of words in the bottom part of the resolution, leaving the number in and the increase in, but just changing it to the maximum to allow some range for us to negotiate up to a maximum of 31,400. And that it could be anything below that from that perspective. Then we're not tying ourselves to utilities or anything along those lines, that we have some room to move. And then when we're having conversations, we can move from that perspective, knowing that probably the bottom end is, you know, the utilities conversation, and the high end is going to be the 31.4. In between that kind of range will be the negotiation range. But with not putting a number in there, it doesn't really give us much parameters to negotiate. We don't know what number is going to be satisfactory. We'd have to bring everything back. But if we have that range,
that's fair.
Then that gives us something to work with.
Good advice. Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Moore, and then we'll deal with that little amendment from Kathy.
And, I was just thinking about over the years, that number has not changed very much. It was always around $30,000 a year. And I think that it was originally computed by a portion of the space utilized by the curling club in relation to the total costs of operating the recreation center or for square footage space. So that hasn't changed very much. And I'm thinking that that number of 30,000 just barely covers utilities for the for that portion of the recreation center. So we may have started off with a lower figure than we should have, and it's only a portion of the total square footage area that they are taking up. And I would think that it would be if the curling club were renting another building space, that they would put in what they need for the sheets of ice and the lounge area and all the other factors involved. So if we're considering that we're actually going to make it a total space for them, then the rent should actually be higher. That's my thought.
Yeah. No, it's a good perspective, Don. So right now, we have a request for a friendly amendment back to Councillor Cooey to add in the word maximum between upon at a maximum cost of 31.4. Do you accept that as the friendly amendment?
Yes, I accept that friendly amendment.
Okay. Lots to think about, Riley. Good luck.
Thanks.
All in favor? Consensus? Motion carries as amended. The Highwood Center. Jody?
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor and Council. As per Council's direction on October 15th, 2019, at the regular Council meeting, administration and the Highwood Memorial Center have reviewed and updated the governing agreement for the occupation and operation of the Highwood Center. The mutually agreed upon draft agreement forms part of your Council agenda package, and administration asks for Council's approval to authorize the Mayor and Chief Administrative Officer to execute the Community Facility License Agreement as presented. Does Council have any questions?
Councillor McMillan?
Thank you, and thank you, Jody. I just noticed on page 131 of our 200-page package that part 5 of the resolution, it says cost of $10 a year, but on the actual license agreement on page 143, it says it's $1 per year. So just to clarify that.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And then the other comment I have is, was it the Highwood Center that sent the schedules at the back listing off all the kitchen things? And
Yes, so Highwood Center and myself and Kevin Albert went through the facility and reviewed the schedule and then determined what would be considered major or structural and what would be considered more operational that would fall under the Highwood Center. And many of those smaller items, like their glasses and that type, that was an easy decision to make, but yes, it's still all included for their scheduling purposes for insurance.
okay, thank you.
Councillor Moore?
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. At the last board meeting of the Memorial Center, they approved signing the license of occupation with the town. It had a lot of debates over different things, but Jody worked it out very well, and everybody's happy.
Good.
I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Moore that Council authorize the Mayor and CAO to execute a community facility license agreement with the Highwood Memorial Center for the occupancy and operation of the Highwood Center for a term of 3 years with an option to renew for additional term as mutually agreed upon at a cost of $10 per year.
I will make that motion.
Thank you. Jody, don't give up that $9.
Actually, when I took a quick look at that, I think that originally, because I attached the former agreement as well as the current agreement, I think the $1 may have been from the former, but I will double check. I will make sure that we get our full $10.
Okay.
But I very much appreciate the note because I will look at it again.
All in favor? Consensus? Motion carries. River Library.
All right, me as well. Thank you very much for allowing me to speak on another item. The High River Library Board has occupied and operated the High River Library for a number of years. However, we don't have a record of a formal agreement between the Library Board and the Town of High River. Administration has discussed entering into an agreement with the library and asked Council for their support to proceed with negotiating a community facility license agreement with the High River Library Board. So similar to the curling club, where we want to come to Council for that initial direction to actually start the process of working through negotiations of an agreement with this group. So any questions on this one?
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, and thanks again, Jody. I just noticed on page 170, that just in the resolution, there's just a bit of a there's a typo. Whereas the High River Library Board, it should be has historically, not as.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I noticed that too. I'll ask for...
it's the editing in me that I can't help it.
You're good at it. Don't. Ask for a motion from Councillor McMillan that council authorize administration to negotiate a community facility license agreement with High River.
Mayor Snodgrass, sorry to interrupt, but Councillor Cooey had her hand up.
Sorry, gotta watch it. Thanks, go ahead, Cooey. Thanks, Carol.
Now I'm muted. It's all good. Just a clarification. I know that the board will greatly appreciate this this lease agreement. It causes much kind of confusion as to who's responsible for what and what that board can or should be moving forward with, and lots of going around in circles as to who's responsible. So appreciate the time that you're going to put into this, Jody, and know that we'll help things move forward more smoothly at that facility. So thank you for that.
Okay, so I'll go back to motion from Councillor McMillan, as I stated before, for a term of 5 years with an option to renew for an additional term of 5 years at a cost of $10 per year.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. All in favor? Carried. Amending lease agreement with High River Sunset Drive-In. Back to Jody again, I bet.
That is, all good things come in threes, right?
That's right.
So just over a year ago, council provided direction to enter into a lease agreement for the westerly 4 acres of the municipal lands, commonly known as the former airstrip lands, which are located directly south of the High River Agricultural Society lands. The purpose of the lease with High River Sunset Drive-In Limited includes the operation and maintenance of a drive-in movie theater and camping during events, which allows for the adjacent High River Ag Society hosting their bigger events to have camping spill over into these lands. On July 24th, 2020, the town received a request to add musical and vocal concerts to the permitted use of the leased municipal lands. Now, this one is a little bit interesting because there are 2 approvals required from the town. One as the landlord for the lease agreement, and the second as the approving authority for the intensification of use. Planning has received and are currently processing the application. Once we get council's direction, they will issue a notice of decision. So we're just looking for council's direction as to whether or not we support this additional use. The recommendation is yes. Any questions from council?
Councillor Masterman. Thanks, Jody.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Thank you, Jody. I've got a couple of questions for you. And the first one, since we are the landlords, have we talked to adjacent, I'm gonna ask 2 questions. Have we talked to adjacent landowners to see what they think of the idea of musical concerts being held out there? That's my first question. Actually, I'll let you answer that and then I'll ask the second one.
Okay, so I can answer that from a landlord perspective. We didn't really consider that. From the planning perspective in the application for intensification of use, that was part of the discussion. My understanding is that this isn't going to be similar to the rodeo events where they have the big loud speakers and pretty much all of the Northwest community can hear it. My understanding is that this is going to be coming through the drive-through system, through the FM radio in the vehicles. So it will not be the same noise level. I'm personally having a little bit of a hard time picturing it because the performers will actually be on stage, but I'm assuming that there'll be a smaller speaker setup and then going into those microphones and going through to the FM radio in that way. We did discuss that there should be further consultation with the adjacent neighbors, just so that they know there would be this type of event there, and including following our noise bylaw as well. So.
Okay, thanks. I'm not sure I could support it unless we did do some kind of talking to the neighbors. And my next question might be a little cheeky, but I'm just wondering why in the package of information on this, there's a letter dated tomorrow from you to Roger Hamill saying it's been approved, and go ahead.
So
it says, "Dear Roger," and blah, blah, and basically says council has approved this. And I'm just wondering, are we really that predictable that you can write these letters to people saying, just so that it can be automatically sent out? Like, I'm just, it just struck me as rather odd for the public to see a letter like that, that kind of presupposes that we approved it.
Yes, and I don't want it to appear that that was intended or anticipated to get ahead of council's decision. That was simply the proposed amendment. So it should have had a watermark across it that said draft or something of that nature. So my apologies.
It doesn't say draft or anything. So thank you.
Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. To piggyback off of Councillor Masterman and the question about talking to neighbors, the camping portion that's in there, I understand that land has been used in the past for campers and things during rodeo events, chuck wagons. I don't know if that specific piece has, but just again, giving permission for that kind of thing, if that part of the community has had the same consideration given to them with that usage.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand the question. Which part of the community?
Well, the Northwest. If you're going to allow campers over there,
oh,
like
okay.
It's not a campsite, right? But they want it to be a campsite sometimes. So just in consideration, if I'm going to have a campsite in my backyard, I'd kind of like to know about it and be able to voice any kind of concerns that might come out of it. But
okay,
because it's bordering on the residential there.
And I cannot comment as to whether or not that was included any public consultation that happened around the area. The camping is not necessarily from this organization. It's more from the Ag Society. And the Ag Society leases the more easterly 11 acres of this portion of land. I don't believe there was any consultation requested or required when we leased that portion of the lands. The only public consultation that has taken place has been specifically in regards to the drive-in movie theater, and now looking at perhaps including an additional public consultation to make sure they are aware of this other use.
Yeah, or just the opportunity for people to speak up, right? Doesn't have to be some blanket canvas, but I think as long as people understand that that will be another potential usage on that site would be appropriate. But thanks, Jody.
Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Just first, I just want to just to make clear about the campsite area. If I understand it correctly, it's on the MD lands, part of the Ag Society, not the actual town of High River lands. It's not correct, Jody, the proposed space. And it's a campground area that has been used and sponsored as a campground by the Autoplex for the chuck wagon and rodeo weekend that we have. But I just want to clarify, it's on MD land and not the town. Not to say that doesn't warrant consultation, but
so it is primarily on the Ag Society lands, which is a part of the county. However, it does occur when they have their rodeo weekend or weekends, and it does spill over into these lands.
Okay, thank you. So full disclosure, The idea of the concert is probably is partially coming to in front of council because the High River District Healthcare Foundation, who I work for, is looking at replacing their fall fundraiser, which obviously can't happen at the Memorial Center. We have been provided the opportunity to host up to three concerts at the facility. It will be a drive-in big screen concert. There will not be the loudspeakers as Jody indicated. They've the group we're working with have already held 14 concerts in different communities, have had no concerns or no noise complaints. There are small speaker systems, but it is all run through your FM radio. And so that's primarily where this is coming from. I think that the drive-in theater sees this as a possibility going forward. It is the way of the world right now. During COVID, there are drive-in theaters or drive-in concerts happening across the Western provinces for sure. So that's kind of the information. I have some information on that if there's more questions that come up, but that is where this request is coming from, is the driver that prompted this request. So just to make sure everyone is aware.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Just first, a little bit of housekeeping. I noticed there's a discrepancy between the $10 and the $1 again on this one, Jody. And also to speak to what Councillor Masterman said about the letter, I was equally surprised to see that there was the permission granted letter, because I think I understand to expedite timing, but I think if that's going to be a policy, that there should be a letter drafted both for and against, because if you're trying to save time, it would be better to have both sides covered. I'm not really in favor of having making this decision without resident input, especially if the Sunset Drive-In group is thinking about hosting more than, like, where I'd consider it is if, according to Councillor Cooey, if it was a one-off, like a special event. But I'm not really in favor of them taking on music concerts when there's so many other places around. And I like the uniqueness of the drive-in. I thought it was just so cool that we had this drive-in and that was its own niche instead of branching out. So I just think, like, I would prefer to have the neighbors consulted for starters, and then I just can't really, I'm not in favor of this as a permanent thing.
Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass, and thanks, Councillor Cooey, for that explanation, and I really appreciate that. But the lease amendment would say to allow music and vocal concerts, so not necessarily just the kind that you described and that the foundation might be doing. It would open the door for the traditional kind of concert that I would like to have resident input before we did that. And I also just wanted to clarify, I'm just looking at the agreement, and it describes the agreement that we have with Sunset, and describes the land description. And it says, whereas the permitted use within the lease is identified as for the purpose of the operation and maintenance of a drive-in movie theater and guest camping for events. So I'm reading that to mean, and I don't remember that we ever talked about camping on that site as part of the initial lease. Now, maybe I was sleeping during that part of the meeting, but this clearly says that camping is already allowed, that we have permitted that. And I don't remember us having a discussion about camping, but this says, this isn't talking about Ag Society land. This is talking about our land because it's our lease. So I guess I just like a little clarification on that.
I believe that, I'm trying to think back how this one came through council. we now have this better process where we are coming to council both at the beginning and at the end of our negotiation processes for agreements. I can't really comment as to whether or not the camping was included in the former discussion. I would have to look back and check the notes and the council presentation. My hope is that it was included when it was presented and approved by council, but without going back through my notes, I can't really comment further right now.
I guess I'm maybe asking the rest of council too. I mean, am I dreaming? Like, did we talk about camping at any point during the sunset lease? I just don't recall that we did. And but I just don't want to be the only one who can't recall that, so.
Okay, I'm gonna jump in here. I'm getting a little bit frustrated. None of this is new. None of it. There's been concerts going on out there since I was a kid. There's been camping going out there since I was a kid. None of this is new. The only thing that's new now is that we got our fingers in it. That's it. All of this has been going on for decades. Now, you know, we have concerts in the park. We have noise bylaws that everybody has to abide by. Like if you're doing it, no, I'm not in for public consultation on this one. It's nothing has changed other than we got our fingers in it now. And you know, if we want to. With this COVID thing and these COVID concerts, they're doing these concerts. The whole PA is pumped through your FM radio. So unless you got your windows open and you got a wicked stereo system and you got it cranked, it's within your vehicle. The monitors, you know, they're on stage monitors, you know, 99% of them are in-ear monitors now. So the only thing you're really going to hear is probably some guitar amps and a drum kit. Which really doesn't carry that far anyways. But, you know, I can literally listen to the chuck wagon races and I can listen to the rodeo off my back deck in the Southwest. So we're going to put a stop to that now too. We're going to go after the MD to put a stop. I'm just questioning where we're going with this. But the camping's been going on forever. It's not new. It's just like I said, we got to be careful. It's just because we got our fingers in it now, we're gonna. I want us to be careful about that. But I'd like to see, you know, we could in this, because this is a little bit time sensitive for this organization, for the foundation to get things arranged. Because if this doesn't go through, either does that. But we could put in the motion where it says with the High River Sunset Drive-In limited to include music and vocal concerts that are broadcast through FM radio only, and just define it as that until we get this. But I want to assure, you know, the rodeo, they have their cabaret concerts, you know, sometimes it's in the arena there, but oftentimes it's in a tent outside, which a tent does not stop a band. It goes throughout. I can listen to the band off my back deck, but there's noise bylaws that it shuts off, and that's just what it is. So, sorry, I think I want to be careful about acting like this is all new stuff and these guys are trying to take advantage of it. I'm sorry, I'm just, nothing that's being requested is new. I'll go back to who's actually got their hands up. Councillor Cooey first, and then Dawn.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify for Councillor McMillan. I don't think they planned to go into this business at all. They knew that they needed to make this request to the town in order for our event to proceed, that we needed to do it with the right approvals. So I don't think they planned to go into this. I think they probably have their hands full trying to get drive-ins on the go. And I don't want to speak for them. And I didn't want to lead you astray to think that they were thinking of going down this road, because I do not know that, and I don't want to speak for them at all. You know, I know that the hospice is also using the facility for their fall fundraiser that's been changed. So I think they just saw, not as a concert, as an actual movie, but I just wanted to be clear that I didn't want to put words in their mouths that this is a path that they were thinking of going on. They're going through the proper channels so that we can host an event there.
Councillor Moore?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I just wanted to reaffirm your comments in that as long as I've lived in the Northwest, that's neighbored this area, that concerts and camping and all sorts of events have been going on. And in fact, the rodeo used the airport landing strip as a camping area for many years as an overflow. And that's why they wanted to have it as an exchange for other land in negotiations we've been having for a number of years. And their Friday night farmers market now, it's fairly well received, and it's fairly busy and loaded with trailers and all sorts of vehicles out there. It's the county has never canvassed any neighbors in High River, and right now there is only one person living in close proximity anyway. So that may change in 15 or 20 years when Spitzy Crossing is developed. But I really can't see that there's any need to canvass anybody, because it just opens up a ball of wax that just says this may be a problem for you, so you're probably opposed to it. And that's not the case at all. I lived and Councillor Nychek lived in very close proximity to the rodeo grounds, the ag grounds, and that area, and it has never ever been a problem.
Don, to Jamie.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Can I get you to back up a little bit there? You proposed an amendment to the motion. Can you reiterate that amendment, please?
Yeah, just the end of the motion that would read to include music and vocal concerts broadcast through FM radio only.
So my understanding would be there'd be virtually no sound anywhere within that area other than what's coming through on your radio?
Pretty much, yeah. Like I said, there's going to be a little bleed off of a drum kit or something, right? When you've got live music, you got guitar amps and drum kits. And
well, if they invite me out to sing, I could support it.
Okay, well, we got to nick this thing, then we cannot have that happen. Okay, Carol.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Cooey. I totally respect your comments, and I respect the fact of the importance of fundraisers. I'm not voting against this because of noise, actually, because I mean, concerts, we can all hear them. But I think the reason why I'm voting against this is I don't want to open up the doors. Like, I understand what you're saying is that this might be just a one-off, but by having it open, that in the agreement that musical concerts can happen, then they can. And I don't think I'm limiting when I say I love the fact that they've got their niche market of being the drive-in. So, but it's totally, I respect the fact that for fundraising and creative opportunities, and pop-up concerts are fun. I just don't think it's the responsibility of I guess, us and Sunset. But thank you very much.
Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. So I'm certainly more supportive of it if it will be the FM speaker type concert. And but with all due respect, things have changed. We have a lease on this that we've entered into a lease agreement with Sunset Drive-In for a drive-in theater, and now somehow camping got added to that, and I assume they're taking camping fees as well. And I don't remember talking about camping. That bothers me. And the music now. I'm a huge music fan, and I don't live in the Northwest. And if people who live in the Northwest are just great with it, especially if it's going to be COVID type concert, and if that's actually written into the agreement, then I'll support it. So, but I do think it's changed when we have an actual agreement with a company, even a company like Sunset that is a nonprofit or whatever. So, thanks.
Okay. No further questions. So I'll ask for a motion from Councillor Kinghorn that Council direct administration to update the use in the lease of the westerly 4 acres of 429-1912 Northeast with the High River Sunset Drive-In Limited to include music and vocal concerts broadcast through FM radio only.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll give you that motion.
Any further questions, comments? I'm going to do this one through individuals. So Councillor Kinghorn, your vote? Or sorry, Councillor Moore, let me go through this properly.
In favor.
Thank you. Councillor Masterman?
In favor.
Councillor McMillan?
Not in favor.
Thank you. Councillor Cooey?
In favor.
Councillor Kinghorn?
In favor.
Councillor Nychuk?
In favor.
And Mayor Snodgrass is in favor. Motion carries. Vote is 6-1. Thank you very much. Excellent discussion. Thanks, Jody. Northwest Lift Station project.
Ready to go?
Ready to go, Riley.
All right. So we're here to discuss the tender award for the Northwest Lift Station. So previously, Council has seen the award of the underground utilities, which Professional Excavators is currently doing. And this was the next step to tie it all together. So we currently have 3 lift stations, and the plan is to decommission all 3 and replace it with one single lift station. We put this out for bid. We had 25, the package was downloaded 25 times, but we only received 1 bid back. That bid is slightly over budget. And I guess that's kind of where we are. It's a little over budget. We'd like to proceed with award. We did talk to ISL in terms of reviewing the bid to ensure it was in line with industry pricing. They have confirmed it is. In terms of options, we could look at trying to negotiate a smaller scope. We looked at that. We weren't terribly sure what we could carve out to get a significant reduction. We could retender in spring, but there's no guarantees on pricing with that. This is also tied in with LTR funding, on which there are deadlines. So we have to be careful of that piece as well. or we could look at deferring this to a future date, but we would, again, lose out on that LTR funding component of it. So that's kind of the project in a nutshell and why we're here today. I'd be happy to answer any questions. I have Krista with me as well. And so between the two of us, we should be able to answer anything.
Thanks, Riley. First question, Councillor Kinghorn.
Thanks, Mayor. Riley, I have a question about this contingency thing that we read about all the time.
Sure.
My understanding of that is that there's a number that they're quoting and they put a contingency in case something goes wrong.
Correct.
Correct? So if nothing goes wrong, do we get to keep that contingency or does that go to them?
Correct. The contingency is our money. And so for the contractor to use contingency, we have to approve the contingency, and B, that would then be negotiated. So they would, through the contract, come to us with a change order that says, hey, high water table's one that we commonly end up paying on. The groundwater was higher than the drill log said in the bid package. Therefore, we had to rent pumps. So you need to pay us for renting and deploying and manning and fueling those pumps. Here's our charge for those pumps. And so we would then look at it. Our consultant would generally review that and compare it to industry rates and advise us if it's in line with those rates or not. And then if it was too high, we'd go back to the contractor, try and negotiate it a bit better. Or if it was in line, then we would pay it.
So Riley, when we do these things, adjustments, why wouldn't we show specifically? Now, maybe it's hidden there somewhere else within the package, but I just saw one number that said included contingency. Why would we not bring it to council that this is what the bid came in at, this is the contingency amount? So we basically have the two numbers because I'm optimistic or hopeful that they'll meet what they're quoting on and there won't be any of those unforeseen circumstances or very minimal amount that weren't considered in the original proposal.
There's always some, Jamie. There's always some. I've never gotten away with none. That said, I mean, the goal is always to spend as little as possible. So we do tack on, yeah, like you said, a generic number. It's a 10% on a bid. Sometimes we even go a little higher if it's a retrofit, if we're dealing with old infrastructure. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was the question, Jamie?
I just wondered why we don't see the two numbers when you bring these requests to council, what the quote was and how much the contingency is, whether it's 10%, 12%, 5%.
Good point. So we're actually doing this one a little differently. Historically, we have always presented purely a budget to council, like a single number. And I think that's what you're referring to. It's always been one number. And in that, we try and wrap up everything. We've always tried to represent a project total. Because at the end of the day, that's really what's important, was what does the project total, or what does it cost the town at the end of the day? In terms of that breakdown, we do have those numbers, and that's what engineering works with constantly, because it's not just the bid number either, because you have a bid number, depending on level where you are in the project, you will run a different amount of contingency. You will have engineering fees on there. Sometimes you have testing fees. Sometimes you have landowner costs. And so they're always trying to manage and track and predict what those numbers are going to be to give that total cost at the end of the day. And so if that was something that would be helpful in terms of separating out, I mean, we do have those numbers and we can present them in more detail if that's kind of how we want to see the process. Well, this one is indifferent in that we actually haven't labeled in the resolution what the budget change is. So we know there's going to be some. We don't want to ask for the full amount now. Let's do the project, find out what the actual numbers are, and then we're only doing one amendment. Historically, we've gotten into these and had challenges with the site conditions or issues with landowners or the project or the contractor or whatever, which has resulted in multiple budget amendments. So this is a little bit of a different process.
Yeah. Thanks, Riley.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. So Mayor Snodgrass, because I don't have my split screen, can you please read out the 6th part of the resolution, please?
The 6th.
The last part, basically, I think it is.
I can, Craig.
Pardon me?
I can. I got it right here.
Okay, go.
And that council direct administration to return to council with a budget amendment for all costs included upon completion of the project.
Okay, so this has kept me awake at night. I have a huge problem with this. I think that this is, and it's not at you, Riley, but I think this is a very poor financial stewardship, because what this is saying is it's almost like carte blanche spending, that, you know, if I had a contractor come to my house and quote me $500 for painting my house, and I agreed to that because it was in my budget, and then the contractor comes back and says, sorry, it's $1,500, pay up. I don't agree with this. And I've got a little bit of wordiness because I've been thinking about this. This is giving too much freedom to spend without any accountability. Our role as councillors is to help with being good stewards of finances, of our ratepayers. And I have never had a problem at all receiving budget amendments before. If this is to save time, it's awful use of, I think it's abuse of the citizens, actually. And I like the budget amendments because we know why and where the additional funds are coming from. And that's integral when we're dealing with the citizens. And we have the right to review project budget amendments. And it puts, and also I've been researching the MGA because I noticed as part of your package, you put down section 248, which a municipality may only make an expenditure that is included in an operating budget, interim operating budget, or capital budget. Well, also section 249(1) is about civil liability of councillors. A councillor who votes to spend money that has been obtained under a borrowing on something that is not within the purpose for which the money was borrowed, or votes to spend money that has been obtained under a grant on something that is not within the purpose for which the grant was given, if we don't know how much is being spent, and at the end of it, because we had budgeted for 2.25 million, and now the bid is 2.376, and the GST alone on that is almost $119,000. So already the project is 126,000 over budget. I'm not going to give permission to just say, oh, go at it, because this sets a terrible precedence for all of our project management to say, go at it. It's just an open bucket of money. Those budget amendments are critical so that we can keep on top of what's happening. Why are there overages? We need that. So I'm not for the 6th part of this motion. I think we should be presented with the detailed budget amendment. Usually Leanna presents it to explain why, or yourself, Riley, but I need to know where the money's coming from.
Well said, Carol. Riley or Chris, would you like to respond to Carol's?
Certainly. So it's not intended to be an open checkbook, Carol, at all by any stretch of the imagination. The award of this contract is for the set sum of 2.376879, excluding the contingency, which is usually about 10%. GST is net. We get the GST back as a rebate directly as a municipality. So that's a moot point from that perspective. And the engineering's already being done except for the inspection side and the testing aspect of things. Those costs will vary and depend from that perspective. So at the end of the day, part of this process will be to keep council informed if there is any significant extras. But the whole process here is to award the contract for the tendered amount. Extras that occur because of site-specific construction, they could certainly come back to council, but we could be facing delay charges. We could be facing increased costs for those delays to bring it back to council for the budget amendment from that perspective. And it could hamper the completion of the project due to weather from that perspective. So it is about allowing the authority to spend based upon the contract and the scope that's been specified. Any unforeseen circumstances is within that contingency aspect of things that will allow us to be within that 10% range. That's the reason why it's worded that way. If the wording's not if council's not happy with that wording, we can certainly change that around. But this is typical process for most municipalities to allow the work to proceed. Because at the end of the day, is council going to stop a work because they don't want to put dewatering equipment in place? As an example. That would be my question to council.
I'm not at all about halting projects and micromanagement, but I don't like the wording about this at all.
Okay.
The other thing that confuses me is on page 195. It says under implementation, once the budget amendment is approved, the necessary contracts will be signed for the project to commence. Why don't we have that specific budget amendment in front of us so that we know exactly that's, and if we keep the wording like this, because in my mind, Chris, that contradicts the motion. That line itself contradicts the motion.
Okay. Fair enough. I understand your perspective on that, Councillor McMillan. This is a budget amendment asking for increased funding to go from the 2.25 million that was budgeted in 2020 capital budget process to go to 2.376879. That's the number. It's a different way of saying it, and a more legal way to award the tender because it's over budget.
Correct, but I just think for transparency reasons, I think it's important to have the budget amendment as the document attached, because then we can even go back and say, okay, it came out of this, and then more of a detailed explanation, because it's not about the project. We need to know about the dollars. Like, we trust that apparently, we've only had one recipient of this, tender thing, but we are responsible to the citizens about money.
And Councillor McMillan, this is being responsible to citizens about money because it is awarding the project based upon the tender that was received for the fixed the price of $2.376 million, which is $126,000 over what council budgeted, right? So that's what we're asking is council award the budget for the increased amount. And if council's not happy with it, then defeat the motion. We will retender it at a later date and stop the project from that perspective. So that's always council's option, is not to proceed with this. But this is probably the more legal way to approach this with an over budget project than a budget amendment aspect of things. The budget amendment is just a financing tool at the end of a project usually to allocate the funds appropriately. But to award a tender project like this, and one that's been legally tendered through a process, this is the way to deal with it appropriately to award it from that perspective. Because if this was in budget, council would not see this.
If I may just speak, and sorry, Michael, I know you're waiting. I don't like the sixth part of the resolution. I think it just opens us up to civil liability, and I think it's irresponsible. So I guess my request would be to take that out. I don't believe in having us find out about discrepancies in the budget after the fact. Like, if this project all of a sudden is going to cost $5 million, I don't want to see that after the fact and say, oops, but we got her done.
Then that would be a matter of trust with us to bring that back. At the end of the day, we're working within a 10% budget contingency aspect of things, because we know that there's going to be unforeseen circumstances. Riley's explained that quite detailed of what we see usually within High River and the high water table and the variation in the high water table. We don't expect that to be a huge amount of dollars. But at the end of the day, we may find those things. We may find an archaeological site that is a different complexity, which will stop the project, but that will come back to council. So administration is here to allow us to proceed, but at the end of the day, there's got to be some latitude to give us some authority to continue making progress that is not significant enough to stop the project. So, at the end of the day, this is the budget amendment by changing the number from 2.25 million to 2.376. It's just a different way of saying it. And that's what we're doing. If you don't like that last statement, we can certainly take that out, but that means that council needs to be prepared that every single change order that comes forward you need to be ready to approve that within 24 hours.
Well, I'm not happy about that sixth part. I just think it's just, my gut instinct is just saying no.
Okay.
Thanks, Carol. Councillor Nychuk. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Not quite on the same line as Councillor McMillan, but why, to Riley, I guess, why don't we include engineering fees? I can understand leaving contingency out, but why is engineering outside of the general dollar scope? And then I have another question after that. It seems we've got
sure.
about 160,000 in engineering fees. Is that right?
So,
just from the math that I can do, but from these numbers that I see, but because contingency would be like 225,000 at 10%, right? So in the
sorry.
three,
Yeah.
well, that's okay. Then in the 385, 627 that you have for estimated engineering and contingency, 225 would be the contingency and the 160 about would be the engineering, right?
Sorry, Mike, where are you looking?
I'm looking at your page number. Well, this is page 204, page 194 of 201 in the council package.
Oh, great.
So it's got the MSI funding portion of Everest bid, estimated engineering.
Oh, the table there.
Yeah. So just to come back, we get rid of the number. Why don't we keep, why is the engineering fee broken out?
Sure. Engineering is broken out because that's a separate contract. We treat that separately because we'll bring our engineer on board first. The engineer will do the design, which is then tendered out, and then we enter into a construction contract. So we'll have an engineering contract and a construction contract. Your construction contract will be the bulk of the costs, but your engineering is always separated out because it's a separate contract.
Okay. So then we're talking like $2,090,000. So we really have like a $400 and some thousand budget overage by going with this one contractor, right? As it stands, without considering a contingency.
No, it's not that high. So with contingency, it's about, it's a little under, no, it's 230.
Okay.
So,
okay, I get the engineering part. I don't want to take up everybody's time just working with some numbers. We can have that kind of conversation another time. Next question goes to the realization of some efficiencies. So when we write in page 1 of 4 in the general implications of a recommendation, combining 3 lift stations into one should result in reduced operating and maintenance costs. And then in the organizational piece, it says there is an expected reduction. I don't like words like should and expected when it comes to cost savings, because that's really what this project is about, right? Well, it's revitalizing the lift stations, but it's also looking for some efficiencies, right? So
well,
should and go ahead.
I wrote those, Mike, so I'll take credit for that. Because I knew if I said it will result in a reduction, you'd ask me for the exact number. That actually went through my head when I wrote that. So I'm glad you picked up on that.
Well, I wouldn't ask you for the exact number, Riley. I just want to know that's you know, that's have some semblance of confidence that in this process, that's going to be the realization. So.
I do have confidence there will be a reduction. We are taking one lift station that's life cycled out, yep. Being the Lynham. We have one that's getting up there in years, which is Eagle View. And Wallaceville, even though it's brand new, it's somewhat redundant in that we're double pumping sewage. So if we can only pump that sewage once, get those other 2 in terms of their life reset, and we have operators only maintaining 1 instead of 3, there will be a reduction in costs.
Super, awesome. Thank you for that vote of confidence. Last question, when we do this, are we going to shut any roads down?
Yeah, 7th for paving.
That's kind of what I thought. What would be the timeline on it, and when would it, do we have some kind of a expectation, or?
We'd have some lane closures on High Country Drive for the tie-in too, but that should be fairly minimal. Krista, do you have timelines for 7th? Oh, I might have lost Krista.
Thank you. That really has nothing to do with putting this through, but that was a curiosity question. Thank you
No,
for your
we
time.
can get you the schedule for that too. That's not a problem.
Thanks much, Riley. I really appreciate it.
I'm going to jump.
I am here. I couldn't get it to connect. So what was the question? Was something about 7th?
Yeah, what was our schedule for doing the overlay on 7th? Is that a spring project?
I don't think I actually know. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We'll get it in the council update.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to Carol's questions, because I completely understand where you're questioning, Carol. There's and I also understand where Chris is coming from, because we have been vocal about being frustrated with certain projects coming back, and there's always a budget amendment to it that has to come back. And you know, we have been vocal about that. But when you started talking, the first word I wrote down was trust, and that's really where that number 6 piece comes into play, as to whether we trust our administration to manage these projects properly without it coming back to us, so that every single time. Because I appreciate 100% where you're coming from, where yes, it's at the end of the year, the budget is our responsibility, and it's our responsibility to manage taxpayer dollars, and at the same time, we got to keep these projects going. So I'm going to read out the motion as it's written. If there's any amendments to that that we need to vote on afterwards, we can absolutely make those amendments and vote on them as well. Is that fair? Okay. So I'm going to ask for a motion from Councillor Masterman that council award the construction contract to Everest Construction Management in the amount of $2,376,879, excluding engineering contingency and GST, and that council authorized the mayor and CAO to execute the contract to Everest Construction Management, and that council direct administration to return to council with a budget amendment for all costs included upon completion of the project. Councillor Masterman.
Yes, Mayor Snodgrass, what you said.
Thank you.
My motion.
Any questions, comments? Councillor McMillan.
So I guess my request would be to amend it to not have that 6th part.
Okay. So Councillor McMillan has proposed an amendment to remove the section stating "and that council direct administration to return to council with a budget amendment for all costs included upon completion of the project." So on the removal of that section, I will ask for an individual vote.
Mayor Snodgrass, Councillor Cooey, and Councillor Masterman.
Oh, sorry. Again, I'm running ahead here. Thank you, Carol. You're on it today. Thank you. Councillor Cooey. Mute.
I just would like clarification if I'm voting on that, because I don't want to defeat the entire motion if I don't support that amendment. So I want to make sure I'm voting correctly. I just want some clarification on how this vote is occurring.
Okay, so the main motion, which is all three pieces of this, is the main motion. The amending motion is to remove the third part. The first two would stay. You would remove the third part. So if you vote in favor of the motion, that gets removed. If you vote in favor of the amendment, then part 3 gets removed. If you vote opposed to that, part 3 stays. You're voting to stay or go.
It doesn't just get defeated then.
The whole motion? No, we're only voting on the amendment right now. Only the amendment.
Thank you.
Councillor Masterman?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Just a clarification. So what we would be taking out is a council direct administration to return to council with a budget amendment for all costs included upon completion of the project. Is that correct?
That's what we would be taking out.
Yeah. Okay. So, and I'm just wondering. So does that mean we would never know the entire cost? Sorry, I'm obviously reading this wrong.
I don't think, no, we can always request back as to what the, you know, you can always get what the final cost is. It doesn't just go away.
Yeah.
This is just formalizing that it's going to come back. Right?
Yeah, wow.
I know what you're saying. Riley, can you answer that maybe?
I was going to make a suggestion. If you're pulling out that 6th one, that you insert what we would traditionally do for a budget amendment. Because then it's clear, because I'm a little, because if you award the project, but there's no money to award the project. The 6th one gave us the latitude to still do that. But without that, I don't know if I can.
Well, without the third piece, so the first two pieces would stay.
Yeah.
The amendment says remove the third piece about coming back to council, which means if there's a which means if you need more money, you got to come back to council for it, and it might stall the project.
So I still have authority to then spend the first piece.
Exactly. The project still happens. It's still tendered.
Okay.
Or it's still proceeding at the 2.3, right? You're just, we're only, right now, the amendment only says to remove the third piece from the main amendment. Okay? Councillor Moore.
If you actually pass that amendment and remove that third piece, you would never be able to amend the budget for the amount that you need.
Without coming back to council. You'd have to come back to council to amend it further.
Well, that's what the third piece says.
Well, that's what the third piece is trying to avoid, is having to do that. That's what the third piece does. That they're just going to proceed with the project and then tell us how much it was at the end, right? This is the thing where it comes back into trust. So if that third piece is removed, if there's an overage, they got to come back to us.
Well, I think the problem occurs here because we only had one tender on this project. Normally, we can choose from a number of tenders and keep it within the budget, but it's already over the budget.
Yeah, and you don't know if we had 5 tenders, whether they'd all come back with maybe this was the low one, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing, when we do these budget amounts for a project, it's a guess. Every single time, it's a guess. You don't know until they tender it, until they go into it, and the engineering and everything else done. You don't know what that number is actually going to be until it comes back.
If you look at the definition of a budget, it's only an estimate, a guess of what expenses or revenues are going to be for a year. So we just take our best guess, and normally supported by engineering design and everything else to get an idea. But on a lot of projects, you have to come back for a budget amendment.
Correct. Where are we? Back, Councillor Masterman. Trying to remember the order, so I apologize if I'm skipping around.
So sorry, I'm just looking for clarification again, because to me that sixth piece or the third piece or whatever you want to call it, it's just formalizing that administration would return to council with a budget amendment, isn't it? Like
no, that's where you got to be. We got to be clear. I'm glad you're asking this, because what the number 3 says is that they can proceed with the project on any level and then tell us how much it was after, not to come with budget amendments as the project goes along. That's what we're trying to avoid here, is stalling projects with having amendments coming back to council right now once a month, once every 2 weeks, without holding special meetings to do a budget amendment, blah, 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 right? So what the third piece does is says the project's going to continue on at 2.3, but if there's overages or under budget, if they cruise and save money, we're not going to know about that until the project is fully completed.
Okay.
We're not going to be notified.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thanks. That's.
I might be making this more complicated than I might be screwing it up more than anybody here. So.
Yeah. No.
But I want to make sure that we're voting on and everybody's clear. So if you're not clear, I'll get somebody else to explain it, because I don't think I'm doing a very good job. Let me go to Chris.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. So basically, and maybe I didn't explain it well enough, the first two lines of this resolution, the recommendation, whereas, that's the budget amendment piece right there. So the budget is $2.25 million. The amendment is going to 2.376. The be it resolved portion is the award to Everest Management because it is over budget. And the sixth clause, it might be worded clunky. We can maybe change that wording a bit, because if you take that out, what that means is that everything above the 2.376 million has to come back. Every change order, if it's $1, if it's $5, has to come back to council. So that's okay with us, but we need to be clear that we need very quick response from council if that's going to be the case.
And
so that is fine.
That's where we come to a trust.
Yeah.
Whether we trust our team to.
You know, the other option here is to be kind of like the fire hall project right now, where we have a budget of $7.35 million. The tender came in at 4.3, and yet we have $3 million of span. That forces us to be more like that than sharpening our pencils and being as close to the number as possible. Now, council has options. Take that clause out, and then we bring back every change order to council for approval. Tweak that resolution, or not award the project at all, and re-tender it in the spring and see what happens. Now, there's some risk associated with all three of those scenarios. But from a project management wise, quite frankly, I've never experienced what I've been hearing what's gone on in this organization before, where everything kind of comes back to council. There's been an award, project proceeds, There's contingency that you are allowed to use up. You use up that contingency and the project's completed. And from that perspective, if there's major glitches, those come back to council, and that's the trust piece with administration and management to bring those big glitches back from that perspective. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does. The other thing we could do is put a dollar figure to it, so that council direct administration return to council with any budget amendments for any overage of $50,000 or more. So that they've got a little bit of wiggle room to work there. But if it's going 100, 200, okay, yeah, absolutely. But if it's 10 grand, I don't want it to be coming back to council for a special council meeting to authorize 10 grand, right? So, Councillor Cooey.
Just another point of clarification. Just, Chris, I just want to make sure when you said, if that's removed, it's only change orders if we get above the 2.3 million. It's not any change orders within the project.
That's correct. The budget that council's approving is that increase from the 2.25 to the 2.376879. And so the change orders, if that clause, 6 clauses are removed, then every change order that goes above that 2.376879, excluding engineering, would have to come back to council.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor. Just you mentioned 3 things, Chris. One was postponing until the spring. Do you think the likelihood of getting more results on the invitation to quote or proposal take place in the spring? I mean, I'm more uncomfortable awarding it to a single source, even though we asked for more. Is there other vendors out there that could do something in the spring, perhaps?
That's always the risk, Councillor Kinghorn. It's really unknown. Having 25 firms take out the tender package gave us an indication that there would be more interest. But what we've been seeing is that everybody's busy. Everybody's got contracts in place and got work going forward. So we may come back and have no tenders, and that's going to be the risk as well, which means that another option that we have is to solicit 3 individual quotes. But for this amount, soliciting 3 individual quotes is a scary process to try and deal with.
Understood. I just would have liked to have seen a couple of, at least one more for comparison's sake.
Yeah. And we've been working on this for about 6 weeks to try and sort out all the numbers to make sure they made sense and lined up with what the budget actually, where the numbers were all coming from and the crossover with the different projects. And Riley's done a good job boiling it down to where we're at right now from where we were 6 weeks ago. So, I think we're as close to budget as we're going to get. And it's just those unknowns. It's like when you dig any hole in the ground, once you get there, you don't know. It doesn't matter how many boreholes you put in the ground. You don't know that all of a sudden you run into an outcropping of granite that you have to blast. And that's a totally different thing, right? So, this is awarding the contract. It's a different way of doing a budget amendment to award the contract at the same time so that we can get rolling on it. And if that 6 clause is a problem, even just putting a maximum contingency amount of 10%, not to exceed a 10% contingency, that would give us that latitude to not have to worry about bringing back every individual change order to council.
Yeah, that's when initially I asked about contingency. It said excluding contingency. We don't know what that is, but if we had that number, I'd feel much more comfortable as well.
Typically at this level, we'd be running between 5 and 10%.
Okay, we're going to stay focused here on the amendment that we're speaking to. So, Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks. Without any further discourse, can we just go with the vote on the amendment then?
Yeah.
Because we're just moving along here.
As soon as I'm done, I agree, Michael. Carol, final comments before the vote?
Yes, I just want to comment that in my mind, it's not about trust. Of course, I trust administration to do the job. It's also the accountability for all of us. And that's just where it's the fact about the coming, it's the upon completion of the project. And that's why I would like to see a maximum number and like it's finite, because I'm just not comfortable with keeping that sixth one in.
Okay. Riley, any comments on the actual amendment? And then we're going for the vote. I'll come to you, Kui. Riley, you got your hand up.
Yeah, Chris was telling me through my wall that I was muted. Just clarifying, the 2.376 has no contingency, therefore no change orders. Change orders always come from contingencies. So the first change order would need contingency funding to be able to be processed. So just that clarification.
Now, Kui, I'm sure you've got a clarification on what you're voting on, no? Okay, go ahead.
What am I doing? There we go. I was curious if how we could, or if we could take Chris's recommendation, either at a number or a percentage that would allow administration to continue to move on if it wasn't over a certain level. If Councillor McMillan might be amenable to that revision.
Yes, I liked what Mayor Snodgrass said. I'm a little bit reluctant about percentage because it depends on how large the dollar value is, right? I don't know. Because I guess I know looking forward at our budgeting process is just like what Chris said. It's almost better to plan higher so that you've got the wiggle room. But I still just think when council approves numbers and then they keep going up, well, then it's a case of, do we need to refine our process or budget process? But I don't know, I liked Mayor Snodgrass's suggestion about an actual number. It just seems safer to me.
Okay, Riley, how would we normally do this? We've done this 1,000 times. Like, remind me, I'm just like, why is this so different right now?
So normally we would do a budget amendment right now for a set amount. So in this case, we would have historically done I'm reading, I actually have it drafted, a budget amendment in the amount of $300,000 to come from the MSI for the main lift station project for a total budget of 2.2. And that's historically how we would have done it. Now, if we run into confusion or something, or there's issues with the change orders, then we come back again.
That didn't make sense to me. Read that again.
And that council approved the capital budget amendment increase to the Municipal Sustainability Initiative grant in the amount of $300,000 for the Northwest Lift Station for a total of $2.2 million for the Northwest Lift Station. So basically we're asking for a $300,000 increase to the budget because the original budget. Sorry, I see Don shaking his head and I know exactly why. So the budget, so when you're looking at the budget of 2.25, that's for 2 projects. So that's actually 2 budgets already put together. We have 2 contracts spanning 3 projects with 3 different funding sources that don't align. We're using LTR, MSI, and gas tax. And so when you roll that all up, the lift station project on its own has a budget of 1.9. Everett's contract spans the lift station contract as well as the force main contract, which are separate budgets. So the portion of Everett, when you apply it strictly to the lift station project, that's where the 300 came from and why it was a total of 2.2. So 1.9, which is the original lift station budget, plus 300 is 2.2.
Okay.
Does that make sense? It gets crazy complicated when you start getting.
Okay. You're really spinning my head now. But I get what you're saying with the
multiple funding sources really makes it kind of messy.
Right. The end number is the end number. Okay, so the amendment that we are now going to vote on from Councillor McMillan is to amend the main motion that includes all three of those pieces, the be it resolved, the and the second and that. So that's the main motion, and her amendment is the removal of the third portion. If you vote in favor, that means you are voting to remove that portion. If you vote against, you are voting to keep that motion or that portion of it. On that note, Councillor Moore, how do you vote on the amendment only?
Opposed.
Councillor Masterman.
Opposed.
Councillor McMillan.
In favor.
Councillor Cooey.
Opposed.
Councillor Kinghorn.
In favor.
Councillor Nychuk.
Opposed.
Mayor Snodgrass is opposed. Defeated. Vote of 5-2. So we will now vote on the full motion that includes 1, 2, and 3, all three pieces. Councillor Moore, how do you vote?
I was going to propose an amendment again.
Okay.
To include a dollar figure in that third section in terms of contingency. The dollar figure can be like a percentage or a figure. I would say 10%. Because the contract is actually excluding the contingency.
And engineering.
So a 10%. So we would be amending part 3, we'll call it. That administration return to council with a budget amendment for any overage over and above 10%.
Right.
Which would mean $230,000.
Right.
So just for wording, I scribbled down, your amendment would make item 3 read, council direct administration to return to council with a budget with any budget amendments for any overage above 10% of contract cost.
That is good, except that I would like the total to be 10%, not a number of up to 10%. So total.
Okay, I'm not sure how to word that. Council directed administration return to council with for the council directed administration return to council with a budget amendment above 10% of contract cost.
Okay.
Trying to simplify it so that, does that make sense, Chris?
Yeah, that allows us to use the contingency for up to the $230,000, whatever percentage for extras from that perspective.
Anything inside of $230,000 does not need to come back to council.
And we're fine with that. We're even fine with a cap of $50,000 just so that we can keep things moving forward because we're running out of construction season, right?
Yeah. Let's do the 10%. That's the amendment on the, and that's, okay. So amendment again to the main motion that we will now vote on. The amendment will read on part 3, council direct administration to return to council with any budget amendment above 10% of contract cost, of total contract cost. Don, that's where we need that word.
Yeah.
Okay. Clear, everyone? What you're
Chris,
voting
you're
on?
muted.
Sorry. Just I was just about to say a word that I shouldn't say. Mayor Snodgrass, just keep it to the.
Hey, if it speeds it up today, rock and roll with your worship.
Just keep it to the tendered amount. So tie it to the tendered amount, not the full contract amount or all total costs, because that includes engineering and other aspects of things, testing and that type of thing. Keep it to the tendered amount awarded to Everest Contracting.
Yeah, and that was the 230,000.
Yeah.
Okay. Council direct administration return to council with a budget amendment above 10% of tendered amount awarded. Got her? So voting only on the amendment. Councillor Moore.
In favor.
Councillor Masterman.
In favor.
Councillor McMillan.
In favor.
Councillor Cooey.
In favor.
Councillor Kinghorn.
In favor.
Councillor Nychuk.
In favor.
Mayor Snodgrass in favor. Vote is unanimous. The amendment is carried. Now back to the main motion as amended. Councillor Moore, how do you vote?
In favor.
Councillor Masterman.
Favor.
Councillor McMillan.
In favor.
Councillor Cooey.
In favor.
Councillor Kinghorn.
In favor.
Councillor Nychuk.
In favor.
Mayor Snodgrass in favor. Motion as amended is carried. Thank you very much. 12th Avenue Southwest Dike portion. Who's talking to this one? I will. So this is basically just acquiring land that we need to finish the Southwest Dike, as well as land needed to build a proper ditch along 12th Avenue. Both purchases coming from the landowner being the Monteiths. This is just formalizing to get this and continue the project moving forward. Therefore, I will ask for a motion from Councillor Nychuk. The council direct administration will acquire the remnant strip of land, 0.655 acres, from the Monteiths in the amount of $32,750 to be funded from the Southwest Dike grant to complete the ownership of the Southwest Dike lands, and that council direct administration will acquire 5 meters of land from the Monteiths along 12th Avenue between the Southwest Dike and Center Street roundabout, totaling 1.521 acres for the purposes of building a ditch with the appropriate backslope for 12th Avenue in the amount of $76,050 to be funded from the 12th Avenue SAF R grant and to allow for the construction of the desired drainage ditch.
I make that motion for you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All in favor? Consensus? Motion is carried. Okay, item 8.1. The infamous municipal mandatory mask conversation. This has been brought up. City of Calgary started this with their mandatory mask bylaw. They call it, and due to the COVID piece, of course, masks are at the top of the list for being the most preventative measure. There's no question. So I'll just open up the conversation, being that is council interested in directing administration to come up with a mandatory mask bylaw within the town of High River? Are there any hands going up? Councillor Masterman.
You knew I had to go first on this.
Absolutely.
So like many of us, I dare say maybe like most of us, I was hoping the province would do this. And AHS and the Premier have decided not to bring in a mandatory mask rule. But every time Dr. Hinshaw talks to the public, she talks about using a mask when it's not possible to socially distance 2 meters. And she knows way more about this stuff than I do. And I trust her on this, that if we want to stop, like we're in round 2 now, if we want to keep our numbers, I don't really care what other municipalities do, or have done, or have decided or not decided. I'm just thinking, if we want to keep our numbers low, and to stop heading into where we were a few months ago, heading back there, I just think that we need to mandate it. And again, I contacted a few weeks ago Dr. Adam Weiss, who headed up our effort here in High River, very respected family physician. And because, you know, what I think really doesn't matter, because I'm not a medical person, but I very much trust Dr. Hinshaw, and I very much trust Dr. Weiss. And Adam Weiss said that he's strongly in favor of mask use in spaces, and he gave me permission to share this with whoever I wanted to, in indoor spaces where 2 meter distancing is not possible. He said mandate works way better than just suggesting, which is what the province is doing. They're suggesting. Dr. Weiss says that he thought it was reasonable to mandate. I expressed a concern to him that, you know, if we were to do this, how the heck do we enforce it? And he said, who cares about enforcement? He said, figure that out if it becomes a problem. He said, keep the economy rolling and wear masks. He said a few other things. He said, you know, he hasn't really sorted out how to eat or drink in a bar or restaurant with a mask on. So he's thinking, you know, if you're inside and you're in a bar or a restaurant, you know, wear a mask if you're moving around, and if you're at a table eating or drinking with a bubble of friends, again, a cohort, you know, people that you know well or hang around with a lot. Servers, he pointed out that servers wear masks. And even Dr. Weiss said smarter folks than me can figure out more details than that. He said there are community spread cases in town. I meant to double check the numbers before today's meeting, and I completely forgot. He said the second wave is here, and he said fall will be more of the same with schools. He said you might as well get used to wearing masks now. And I think we all noticed that last week the province said they changed it. They said that grades 4 to 12, students and teachers and staff, or teachers in particular, will be required to wear masks. The education minister announced that last week. And again, Dr. Weiss said, keep the economy rolling, wear masks. He said, vaccines are at least a year away. And I think a lot of people are living in hope that we are seeing the end of this thing, and the end reasonably is when there's a vaccine, and not a whole lot before that. So my feeling is that you know, in indoor spaces where you can't, and yes, there will be exceptions. So there will be people who, for medical reasons, can't wear a mask. But I think even in those people, I think you have to be really careful. Like, for somebody to just say, I'm asthmatic, I can't wear a mask, that's not true. Possibly some asthmatics, that's not true. But to just make a blanket statement and say, I can't use a mask because I have asthma, and again, I'm not a medical expert or anything like that. I just think if we can prompt, like right now, you go in stores in High River, and I'm in the minority. Definitely, I wear a mask in stores, and I'm not wearing a mask to keep me safe. I'm wearing a mask to keep other people safe. And even though I don't think I have it, but I just want to make sure that I'm not spreading anything. And I just think that you know, I don't think it has to turn into a big confrontational, you know, public relations, you know, nightmare. I think, you know, I don't think we need to shame people on either side. Great, Dawn, you look great. You know, I was at a meeting a few weeks ago, and somebody tried to shame me because I had a mask on, and I refused to take it off. And because we were in a closed room. So I think by mandating it, you're appealing to the people who aren't sure. A lot of people want to just do, if it's a bylaw, if it's a law, they want to do the right thing. They want to follow what the law is. And a lot of people won't do it for that very reason as well. I don't know, those are just some random thoughts. I should have been more prepared to speak to this, but I just think that we have especially here in High River, where we had such an outbreak and such high numbers that we never, and I know a lot of, you know, it was basically Cargill related, but I just think if there's any way we can help stop or at least lessen the impact of this second round, that we should do whatever we can do. So that's all I have to say for now. Thanks.
You're on mute, Craig.
Sorry, thanks, Bruce. Just so everybody's aware, current number of cases in High River, I just brought it up with their update, is 5, is where we're at. So Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I'm definitely in favor of wearing masks, but I just want to bring up a couple of points about I wear a mask everywhere when I'm indoors. And of course, being in business, all of my 18 people that work shifts at our store are wearing masks. I provide partially, probably about 10 of those people, those workers with masks, combined with the cost of the hand sanitizers and all of the other PEP and stuff that we've had to implement. There is a cost to small business. And I know that anybody who has said that they require people to wear a mask when they come into their business, it's up to the business owner to supply those masks to the customers. Otherwise, they just won't come into your store, or they won't be allowed to, actually. So I always go back to the old adage and applying to masks and social distancing, the 2 meters is you can't fix stupid. And that's a very, for a lot of people, that's not going to wear masks anywhere, and they will rebel against that. But I know that when I'm wearing a mask, it's for the protection of people that are around me, not primarily for my own protection. So if you've got a person that doesn't care about anybody else, they're not going to wear a mask. So it will be a burden on small business economically if they are forced to come up with more money to supply that portion of PEP over and above what they've already done. It's difficult. We've got visors in our store that we can supply to people and sanitize them after they're left. I know that people that have required masks from customers have abandoned the project, and they're trying to hand out masks to people at their cost, but it's just some people are not going to wear masks no matter what. I know since we reopened that, and we ask people, our customers, where they're from, if they're High River residents, 75% of the customers we have in our store are from Calgary. So it's what they're doing is getting away from a place where they can go in without having a mandatory mask bylaw. So it's actually good in one respect for us economically, but bad in that Calgary has more confirmed cases of COVID, and having them all come to a High River might not be a good thing. So it's a tough one. I think everybody has to be responsible for themselves and making sure that other people, and probably the 2 meter distance is the most beneficial thing, but there's a lot of people that aren't looking at 2 meters. And when I'm thinking of events and stuff like that, of the Memorial Center, when they're going to have a fundraising event, they're taking every precaution they can for the 2 meters distancing. But if they were requiring all people to attend an event, especially a dinner, sit-down dinner event, to wear masks, that would be kind of an almost impossible situation. So it's a debate one way or another. Many people realize that masks are a good thing, but there's other things to consider if we were ordering mandatory masks.
Thanks, Don. Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I guess to talk a little bit from the other side of the coin, because I certainly think there's going to be a point where these are necessary. I think it's easy to say worry about enforcement after, but we struggle to enforce the bylaws we have. And I guess my concern is the setting up of citizens against citizens. I think certain citizens will take it upon themselves. My apologies. I'm curious about what people's thoughts are of tying a bylaw, having a bylaw ready and tying it to the province's standards, whether it be a watch or an enhanced. So if our community hits that, we have a bylaw ready to go that mandates those masks. Rather than, I guess, you know, I'm not opposed to it at all. I don't want to lead that to say, I just want to have the open conversation that, you know, if we're looking at a year down the road, we already see people tiring of it. And so if we can encourage it or enforce it when it's more needed, is there a benefit to that?
Thanks, Kathy. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. I, to this day, still think that this shouldn't be on the burden of municipalities to make the decision. I think it should be a provincial level decision. But on that note, I'll give you my rationale. We've always stood by that the municipality has no right to muddle in people's businesses. I think it should be up to the business's choice whether they want this or not. Some key things that I took away from Adam Weiss's email is, first of all, I was happy he clarified something that I've questioned, was I always wrong as a nurse? But he says in his email, the masks are to keep the wearer safe. That's how it was like when we were in the hospital. It was, you're wearing it to protect yourself because it was already a sterile environment. I don't like tying in, I don't know if it was Mayor Nenshi who got the whole keep Alberta rolling, like wear a mask. Those are two separate issues. Wear a mask, it has, in my mind, has nothing to do about keeping Alberta rolling. I think, and I know Councillor Morris said about you can't fix stupid, but I still, call me an optimist, but physical distancing and strong, proper hygiene are two great ways to handle germ control. I think, and this is why I don't think it should be a municipal decision. I think it's a terrible burden on municipalities because look at the disconnect. You've got one municipality saying yes, the other no, whatever. But I just think that from my own experience, I have yet to have a citizen come up to me and want mandatory masks. They're choosing to wear them in areas where they can't physically distance. And I just think that along the lines of Councillor Cooey, we don't want to have citizens pit against each other. And I will just say ironically, and I found it kind of funny because the only time I've had my physical distancing compromised has been with someone with a mask. And I'm not generalizing, but it's because I think sometimes people think they can get close with that. And I was even in a line the other day, physically distanced, when the gentleman behind me with a mask said, "This is great because now I can just sneeze into my mask." And so it's just, go figure, right? And even on the litter level, I mean, I used to pick up litter all the time, but I don't pick up used masks that I see on the ground. So I think this is above the scope of municipalities. I don't think we should be put into this position to have to decide. And as far as, I guess a key factor for me would be if we were in a state of emergency, or if we had, because I think 5 cases we're doing really well. And I think it's more a case of along the lines of Councillor Cooey about if we revisit it, if we see numbers drastically change, because I mean, we got through the Cargill situation. So.
Thanks, Carol. Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the comments from Councillor McMillan and Councillor Cooey, Councillor Moore. I have to agree with Councillor Cooey and McMillan. And, I've done a lot of traveling over the last 2 to 3 weeks. I've been in Ottawa, I've been in Winnipeg, I've been in Regina, I've been in much number of different airports, obviously, car rental places, that sort of thing. I put it on myself to wear a mask when I'm in those environments. That's me, that's my responsibility. And I think we need to, educate the people. Education is the key to this whole thing. When Hinshaw was questioned about why not make masks mandatory across the province, her response was that not all regions are the same or have the same risks. I think were words, I'm not quoting, but something to that effect. So I would support if we asked administration, and I'm not sure this is part of a municipality's responsibility, to come up with some sort of a bylaw that we could use when we did hit a certain level. And my suggestion that level would be, as Kathy stated earlier, if we got onto the watch list, then we roll it out, and this is the reason why. But as it stands today, we're doing well. It's interesting. I go into Sobeys and no staff are wearing masks in Sobeys, and very few of the clients. You go to other places and everybody's wearing masks. So I don't know. This is one that I've been thinking about a lot for the last couple of weeks, and I just don't know where to go with it. Thank you.
Councillor Nychuk.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Following up with Councillor Kinghorn and Cooey and McMillan, I'm of the same mindset. I really think this is a personal responsibility, not only from a mask perspective, but to what Councillor McMillan said on personal hygiene. And going to the observation that Councillor Kinghorn had on different businesses in town, if you get a grocery environment, I used to work in the grocery industry, and you have a lot of employees in and out, and you have a lot of customers in and out. So you would think a high traffic environment like that could potentially be a breeding ground, a transfer point for that to happen. If the business is maintaining exceptional hygiene practices, you're eliminating a lot of that concern. And we see that happening in a lot of businesses in High River. They're looking after their customers by providing excellent hygiene at the door and promoting it throughout their facilities. So coming to, I think it was Councillor Cooey that mentioned the division that we can create by doing this with citizens. There's a real, not to use right and left from a political perspective, but there's a real division between one side and the other about wearing masks and not wearing masks, and then there's a whole bunch of us in the middle that are just trying to be responsible to each other so that we keep each other safe. I'd like to put my faith in people, that they'll do the right thing, that generally most people in our community are going to be responsible and are going to be caring. But a last point to this is that if we put a bylaw on the burner, so to speak, if things get really wild and crazy, that we can implement it right away as that precautionary measure, as a piece to have in our hip pocket, so to speak. So that's where I'm at. Thanks for letting me share my thoughts.
Back to Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. I'll be really quick. I appreciate all your comments. I also have thought about this a lot, and to me, no, it's not our responsibility. The province should be doing it, and the province could have done it in such a way that it's not mandatory in places that don't have any cases or have one case or whatever. They could have done that. I mean, I heard the Premier say the reason we didn't do it is we were afraid it would become political. Sorry, it is political. Now we're dealing with it, and other municipalities are talking about it. So it is political. And I think the main issue I have with kind of waiting until things reach a level is so much, trying to take the cream out of the coffee. Like, it's there already. Like, you can't do that. It's trying to, if we say, if it reach if our numbers reach a crisis level, then we'll have this bylaw ready to come in. I'm sorry, it's going to be too late by then. But anyway, that's, I said I'd be quick, and so I'll just leave it at that. But thanks, I really appreciate everybody's comments.
Okay, my turn, and then we'll go to Carol. So this is, without a doubt, the hottest topic, other than whether the virus actually exists or not. This is the most controversial thing, this mask thing. Is, you look on Facebook and the demos of whether masks work or they don't, but you'll never convince me that masks do not work. Like, there's just, masks work, period. But I have serious concerns with doing any kind of mandatory bylaw and the municipality doing a mandatory bylaw. Number one, it's impossible. Number two, Calgary's is what I consider fake. It doesn't actually exist, and I'll go into that more. It's optical, it's political, it's everything with that. And I've read their whole thing on the Calgary website. I look at this, there's boundaries. And as much as, I believe in masks and everything else and the benefit, and I agree with Adam, what he's saying about how important they are, we have boundaries as a municipal government as to what we delve into and what we do not. And there is a Ministry of Health in this province. And regardless of what you think, if they're not putting this into play, this is their responsibility. They should be doing it. And if they're not putting it into play, does not mean we should be. It doesn't. There's not one of us on this that would be making this decision that is remotely a professional in this. So we got to be very careful. Not that we're professionals in anything we vote on, but there's boundaries of where we operate. For us to be telling a small business in this town how to operate, I'll tell you the first thing I'll tell you if you walk into my place and tell me how to operate inside here. You're get your ass out. Is just the way it is. And I have mandatory masks in here. Anybody that comes into my facility, we all wear masks. That's my decision. My staff, my customers, Everybody does that, but that's mine. And if we go into a mandatory bylaw telling businesses what they must do, I'm sorry, that's overreaching. And it's beyond political, it's just overreaching. As far as the conversation of having a bylaw on the burner, I disagree with that. Because even if we have the bylaw, we cannot enforce it anyways. We will not enforce it. We can't enforce the existing bylaws we have now. We're definitely not going to have the guys diving into this one. I can guarantee you. Calgary isn't doing that. They're smarter than that to go down that road. They've set it out right. So if we won't enforce it, it doesn't exist. And I know where Adam is going with it, but period. If people know you're not going to enforce it, the bylaw doesn't exist. So with the Calgary, because they're the ones that started all this, so I'll speak to it. But you know, they did a lot of areas, but you're unable to deal with where they're actually having the problem areas, which is nightclubs, bars, restaurants. You know, they did all this, but did not deal with the actual problem areas. So that made me scratch my head. And then they've got a list of exceptions. You know, with children under 2, or you know, asthmatic, diabetic, whatever your reason is for not wearing a mask. But there's also a please note down at the bottom that states proof is not required if someone has an exception. So anybody can say they have an exception, number one. And businesses are also not expected to deny services, as not everyone is required to wear a face covering. Done. Doesn't exist. Period. And I don't do a lot in Calgary, but just through the business. I've been in 3 businesses since that was mandated. And none of them were following this. None of them. So that's a big reason. We're building bylaws just to make us feel better. Here's my biggest concern about doing this in High River. There is already more than enough shaming going on that you've experienced, Bruce, and I think I was sitting there when that happened. And there's already enough of that going on between these masks and everybody's different opinions. But I haven't seen it when I'm wearing a mask in Canadian Tire. And I haven't seen it, you know, you get a stink eye or something, but it's becoming normal. And people are, for the most part, leaving it alone. But my biggest concern is that council mandating mask wearing would only, and we're not policing it, going after people that aren't. My concern is that mandating this would only give license to one side to police the other. I got real concerns over that. And that's what it would do. And we do not need that in High River. We do not need our residents going after each other. I agree, this is a personal responsibility. I encourage the use of masks. There's no question about that. But I also respect the rights of individuals and respect the rights of private businesses. If the town of High River, if we want to mandate in our facilities, culture center, rec center, town office, we want to do that, that's where our boundary is. We can do it. We can do that in there. Going outside just, to me, is overreaching from our boundaries, and I think there's consequences to doing that. But back to Carol.
Thank you. And I want to say I appreciate everyone's comments and input, and thank you, Mayor Snodgrass, because you succinctly put it very well, because what I was going to add when I was thinking about is I don't want a bylaw in our back pocket, because I just firmly don't think that this should be our responsibility. So thank you. You're on mute, Craig.
Thank you. You are just on top of it there. Carol, thank you. Councillor Masterman.
I just want to leave myself on mute so somebody will tell me I'm on mute and, or not tell me. But so Craig, you touched on this. Is there any appetite among council to have administration look at our own buildings, our own facilities?
Anybody?
Town office. I guess I may be looking for Chris's thoughts as well. Town office, rec center, library, museum. I believe the museum is masking already, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe I am mistaken.
Yeah, and so I'll let you answer that in a second, Chris, but just so everybody knows, myself or any councillor can put forth a motion to vote on any of this stuff at any point in time if you wish to do so. Chris.
So in answering Councillor Masterman's question about masks in the workplace here, we've been monitoring it. People are provided with masks at their workspace, at their desks, and if they want to use them, they can use them. We're really forceful on social distancing and limiting time and space. So that whole concept of bigger spaces, fewer faces kind of wording. It's becoming more and more of a challenge to have meetings for sure without masking up. And we're looking at different bigger spaces. And it is harder when you're masking to hear what people are saying, because we've had some meetings where we have. It's especially with accents or people that were hearing impaired. We're having some challenges with some of our staff that have some hearing challenges, having meetings with them. So it's been those types of things. Certainly, it's something that we're thinking about any relaunch of to the public of what we do here and how we manage that. Thankfully, we have barriers in most spaces right now, and we'll have barriers within the rec center as well when we open there, so that there's a physical barrier between people. But it's certainly something that we're contemplating from that perspective to be prepared for, and waiting for council's direction on what that looks like. Within our own spaces from that perspective. Now, the Culture Center, if it's a private facility and a private rental, that's going to be something different, and that's going to be up to that renter, just like the Highwood Center, to mandate what they want to do within that space from that perspective. So there is some gray area from that perspective, but we can have a bylaw ready whenever council asks us to have one ready. And enforcement will always be a challenge with whatever bylaw we have. It doesn't matter if it's this, if it doesn't matter if it's dogs or cats. This one certainly is probably outside that sphere of influence for sure of any municipality, because we're delving into healthcare. And that's something that we should try and steer clear from as far as possible and leave that to the professionals to make that claim. But when it comes to our organization right now, we haven't thought about making it mandatory right now with no public in the building and shared space with the county. There are mask up rules when you cannot maintain social distancing for all our public works employees. So when they're sharing a vehicle, they have to mask up. When we can't get 2 meters of social distance, and 2 meters is not 6 feet, it's 6'7". I want to make everybody clear of that. When we can't get social distancing, people are masking up from that perspective, and we're meeting in bigger spaces with fewer people. And so we're doing our best from that perspective, and nobody's had any concerns so far.
And maybe Bruce will, Riley's coming back, like the reopening of the rec center is one where we really need to watch this. So as to what we're doing in our facilities. So unless somebody wants to make a motion here today, maybe we'll wait for Riley to come back as to kind of what their plan looks like with reopening the rec center before we go any further. No? It's up to you. If you want to make a motion right now, we can make a motion and vote on it.
You know, I'll be honest with you. I'm tempted to make a motion, but I know it's not going to pass. I appreciate all your thoughts on this, and you know, why would I make a motion just you know, for the pro-maskers? They think I was a hero and just kind of posturing. I've said what I believe, and I still believe it. And but I also appreciate and respect the rest of you and what you said, and you're not wrong, and I'm not wrong, but it's just one of these issues that you know, can just really split, and has already split a community, and so. I'm not going to make a motion just to be a hero in the eyes of the pro-maskers, and but I think we'll keep an eye on it. It may be something we can revisit, and maybe it's something we'll be forced to revisit by the people who actually should be doing this.
And I think that's an important thing, Bruce, that has gone on since day one with this thing, is learning from the realities that are coming at us. If you remember when this first started, it was kind of like, well, what masks were almost, you know, nobody was promoting them. Just wash your hands. That's where this started. Now we know, after going through this, we've learned that masks are equally as important as washing hands, especially if you're indoors and in close proximity. So we can absolutely bring this back at any point in time. If there's new information that comes, it's very important that we know that and are making decisions based on that. So well done. Appreciate the conversation. We will move on to the next item, being item 9.1, request for donation. Chris or Riley?
Certainly, Mayor Snodgrass. This is the letter request that we've received back in middle part of July, requesting the use of our millings and our asphalt, disposable asphalt for use at the drive-in movie theater. Council was quickly pulled, but we want to bring this back for kind of conversation and whether or not we continue moving forward with that donation to the group for hard surfacing or solidifying the surface to access the drive-in movie theater.
Okay, so this is the crushed, reused asphalt that's sitting out in our town yard. There's quite a pile of it. So my first questions to Chris and Riley are, is this product going to be used by the town of High River? Do we need this product?
So I can answer that. The product is actually a result of an agreement we have with Shawnee to begin with. So we have a contract with Shawnee where they are milling our giant pile, and payment for doing that milling is they get a portion of the material and then leave a portion behind for us. We don't use a lot of it. And so this extra little bit, which we would then allocate to Shawnee for the donation, isn't the end of the world, because like I said, we don't go through a lot of this material, and we tend to generate a lot more asphalt than we ever use up in terms of millings, because this comes from a lot of our projects, whether it's our own crews doing the work or sometimes our contractors, you know, for sidewalks or whatever. So we can never use it all.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kinghorn.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I just wanted to add on to that a little bit. My understanding is there's no cost to us at all, that Shawnee's going to do all the transportation from the site out to the drive-in, and that the requirement for this material is based upon the fire requirement for access to the drive-in. They need to have a certain level of, I don't know the correct verbiage, you may know it, Riley, but that's why they were looking for the material. I believe they have it now already, but they had an invoice for it, and they were just looking to get a donation back where they didn't have to pay that invoice. However we handle that.
Can you comment on the invoice? Where are we at? Do they have the product right now, Riley? Or
My understanding, it's already been placed with regards to the fire lane. I'm not quite sure about that, though.
okay, Councillor Masterman.
You're muted, Bruce.
Hey, I did that to myself, not on purpose.
He wanted it.
No, I didn't want it. Like any donation, it's nice to know what the value of this is. How much of a gift are we giving? Is it $100 worth of stuff? Is it 22 cents worth of stuff? Is it $25,000 donation? How generous are we being?
What's the invoice amount, if there's an invoice?
I don't know. I didn't know there was an invoice. In terms of the value, to be honest, I can't even know. I don't know. No clue. It's been a very long time since I bought BRAP, and I can't even remember what I paid for it at the time. So a lot of times this stuff, the value is in the time Shawnee put in for grinding it up, basically.
Okay. I wouldn't mind knowing the number at some point. I'll support this now, but without knowing the number, because it's a good cause, and but I wouldn't mind knowing the number.
Yeah, we can ask around, maybe give Volker a call and see what it's worth and stick it in a council update if that works for you, Bruce.
Okay. Thank you.
So no further comments. So I'm kind of hearing the council's okay with this donation. Anybody against it? I'm getting all head nods. So good to proceed. So I just texted Wes Shaw about an invoice, and he said no, they have not received an invoice. So. Okay. Continue on. Jesus, that's the moan end. Pigeons. I get stopped.
Certainly, thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. This has been an ongoing issue since the bylaw came into place. We've had a few extensions with individuals that do race pigeons within the community. This individual was granted 2 extensions through the COVID period, and the 3rd extension was a request made in middle of July when their deadline was coming up. And I met with them face to face, actually in George Lane Park, at one of the fire pits themselves, and the president of the Canadian Racing Pigeon Association of Canada, I think it is, out of Calgary, and local president. And they gave some insight, and they're requesting a further extension so that they can come and present to council the concept of racing pigeons and the importance for these hobbyists that undertake this sport within the community. And my understanding is there's quite a few residents that undertake this sport currently, and we've only had one that's transitioned to transition their pigeons away from the community. And this is the most recent one that we've had some complaints in regards to. And so he's requesting this extension. And it's one that has to be granted by council because we're kind of exiting the urgent COVID period. Staff don't have the authority to extend it any further.
No, wasn't one of the big issues where these birds flying around houses and crapping on cars and everybody else's house and everything? Isn't that what we were trying to, that was one of the big issues that came to us as to why we got rid of this, right? So are they changing that?
According to these individuals, these are pigeons that are well kept, they're immunized, they're fed the top grade feed, that they're controlled. They practice flying from their coops located on property, but they don't freely fly around on a regular basis.
Okay, so I understand they're bulked up and they're jacked up pigeons, right?
Yep. So they don't roost.
They still shit.
Yeah, they do, but the intent, what they've shared is that they do come back to their roost, their home roost, and they return based upon calls and signals when they're training. They do have races where they drop them off 800 to 1,000 kilometers away, and they track their way back, and from that perspective, and come back to their roost and their coop. So, you know, it's not to say that they don't attract other birds similar in nature that want to hang out with them, but they want to present, and they want an extension to the end of November for this individual to move forward from that perspective. So it was interesting information. Not certain it necessarily changed administration's mind on any changes to the bylaw or not, but you know, certainly they felt that they weren't adequately heard through the process.
And sorry, what happens at the end of November?
Well, that would be the deadline for any extension for this one individual. Then enforcement action would take place if it's granted. If it's not granted, he'll be advised tomorrow that enforcement will be, he's got 7 days to get the pigeons off the property and get moving.
Okay. Councillor Kinghorn.
Oh, I didn't have my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, you don't have your hand up. I just saw you were unmuted. But Councillor Cooey.
Thanks, Mayor Sardes. How many, and I know we had the one complaint, serious complaint about the one coop, and I guess there's always the chance that maybe they aren't racers, or maybe they aren't the most diligent racers or follow all the rules, and maybe maybe we're talking about two different scenarios. Krista, we've received other complaints from other coops beyond the one that came forward when we were doing the bylaw.
We've received that one, and this individual has had a complaint. So when the complaint came in, it came in early March, and then COVID hit, and we granted a waiver, I guess, an extension to move the pigeons off site. We had issued them a letter in early March to remove them within 30 days, and then COVID hit, and we granted 2 extensions to that because of how COVID was impacting the community.
And was the complaint similar to the first? Was it noise? Was it mess? Was it all of the above?
That I can't answer. I can't answer. I haven't seen the details of that complaint. I just know that enforcement wasn't taking enforcement action against them.
Thank you.
Councillor Masterman.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Well, I think our residents would take some comfort in the fact that it's pretty high-grade poop. You know, it's interesting because we do these things, and people don't like it, and then they just write letters, and they in the hope that we just change our minds, and I guess maybe we do every now and then, and but you know, his letter says he would like to keep his pigeons till the end of November, but we're willing to cooperate whatever the next process is. Except before then, he wants to come to council and tell us all about racing pigeons, and I you know, I think it's wonderful the therapeutic effect his birds might have on his son, or do have, but pigeons are dirty. They spread disease, they carry disease, and I know he says his are not. Like, I guess my question is, when we were doing this, I don't know if we were actually told how many people in town have pigeons. You know, we certainly heard from a resident, Brenda Benson, right at the time, who spoke very vehemently about the mess that are the people next door. Their pigeons were having it on her place, and the sounds, but I don't know. I guess I'd like to find out, you know, how many others are there?
That,
You know, and maybe there's an appetite to revisit this as well. Unlike the rest of you, I'm not really keen to revisit it, but
Councillor Masterman, we don't really have a good inventory of how many, but the president of the association did allude to the fact that there is more in town than we think. There's certainly, you know, it's not like we've been jumping fences and going in everybody's backyard and surveying their sheds and seeing what's going on, but certainly certainly if there's 2 in town, there's certainly more, because it seems to be a very close-knit group and kind of very clubbish from that perspective, and very competitive from what they've shared with me in that face-to-face meeting. So they gave an example, for example, and I haven't had this confirmed because it was just before I went on holidays, but they had gone, Chestermere had a limit of 1 pigeon per household as a restriction, and they went and made a presentation, and apparently Chestermere lifted that regulation of 1 and gave them, we're going to give them an unlimited number, and then came down to a more realistic number that they could house based upon the property size. And the one individual, the president, lives in that area, and he's got a 5-acre parcel of land, and he's got like 50 pigeons. You know, nothing's being confirmed, you know, and that's the only thing that they presented to me, and those are the types of details they want to bring to council about all the different jurisdictions and what they do from around the city of Calgary.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not trying to defend the issue of pigeons. I think there was a strong rationale why we had to do the bylaw the way we did, and the process that we undertook. At the end of the day, it's also the personal responsibility of those individuals that do have pigeons to pay attention to the paper and understand what council's doing that may affect them. If we don't know about them, we can't address their concerns adequately or effectively, or understand the reasoning why they're doing that. So, it is a degree of responsibility. It's always after the fact that people come forward and say, oh, woe is me, here we go, you're impacting my life, how do we change it? But never on a constructive to build the regulations up front from that perspective.
Councillor McMillan.
Thank you. Yeah, this is kind of interesting because it was after the fact and when I got a letter, but I mean, we're all human that we can miss things like due to jobs or whatever. But I think it's been fair with the extensions granted thus far. But what my question to you, Chris, is did you, seeing as I had encouraged you to meet face-to-face, because there is a bit of a language barrier and comprehension just because of the language barrier, did you set clear direction about what would happen if there was no extension? Or
yeah, made it very, very clear because he brought a representative with him, the president of the local pigeon, the regional pigeon association, I guess, and made it very clear that there's no guarantees, that will present the letter, and it's council's decision whether they grant a further extension or are willing to hear you at all. His other option was legal challenge to the bylaw under different parameters, which I encourage not to follow through with because it would just cost money and it would be a long process and would not necessarily get the answer that he wanted from that perspective. I think he understood. He didn't talk at all. It was the president of the Racing Association that did all the talking. They were encouraged to write the letter to request an additional extension. That was the direction I gave them. And that's what's on the agenda today, was to deal with that from that perspective. And I told them very clearly that I was not the one to grant a further extension. That's up to council at this point in time.
Right. Like, I've got mixed feelings. I almost wouldn't mind giving the extension so he's got proper time post the thickness of COVID to deal with the birds properly. or perhaps to speak to us. I'm not saying about changing the bylaw, because I mean, we said it, but I just think for all of us, it's nice when we are having those public hearings, if you hear from both sides, right? And I remember when I received his letter after, I felt a little bit bad that we hadn't heard from the other side as well. So I just find it's just rather difficult. I mean, and trust me, I've been getting a lot of letters about it. And, you know, I would have, just like what Councillor Masterman said, I would have liked to have known how many people actually do own them in town, because I had never even heard of pig racing before.
Yeah, I didn't realize how extensive it is in the history behind it. And they shared a lot of that in our hour or so meeting that I had with them. And there's an extensive network in the province of Alberta and right across Canada. They shared, you know, the feed is shipped from Europe at like $50,000 a pallet, $50,000 a pallet worth of feed, $500 a bag, kind of thing. So it has to come from a very specific location as well. So you know, I'm not a pigeon expert. Don't want to be a pigeon expert. You know, at the end of the day, if there's an extension to be granted, it's up to council to grant that extension based upon the information that we have. It doesn't stop them from coming or making a request for petition delegation if council says no to this extension and presenting new information that may or may not convince council to amend the bylaw. But we certainly have had issues and complaints in certain neighborhoods of the community that we've had to address regarding the mess and the potential for spread of disease from that perspective. You know, pigeons are carriers of respiratory diseases that are similar to what bats carry as well. So there's those types of things that we have to worry about, especially in confined spaces. Now, these pigeons, what they've told us, are vet checked and they get immunized annually and are supposed to be top-notch health to keep racing. So lots of information that they shared, way too much to share today. And like I say, I do not want to become an expert on pigeons in any stretch of the imagination. I just wanted to make sure that council got the letter and made the decision with as much information as they could today.
Councillor Masterman.
Thanks, Mayor Snodgrass. Very, very quickly, I guess I just feel a little badly if we make Francisco get rid of his birds and there's 20 other people in town that have birds, and because they're silent and they protect each other and they don't talk about it and they have their own little community, you know, meanwhile Francisco and his son are without their birds because we've made them get rid of them, and then there's 20 more. Like I don't know. They definitely carry disease when they're not cared for, when their poop's not cleaned up regularly and thoroughly. So.
Okay, so my thought is we have a bylaw. We have a bylaw that's in place. There's been extensions granted, and we made this decision based on the information that we had, and the public was invited to come and say their piece at that animal bylaw. And you know, it's always, oh well, you didn't come and talk to us. Well, you know, there's a responsibility to watch what's happening in town, and we've made this decision. And you know, we have bylaws with dogs that you got to pick up your dog crap, you got to pick up your cat crap. That's part of pet ownership. Now we've got, you know, if you've got backyard chickens, well, they're in your backyard. It's not a bird thing. These are pigeons that, from what I've been told by the complaints, that yeah, they do circles around the house, and so I don't know. I'm not interested in an extension. I'm really sorry, but we've made this bylaw, and unless we want to change the bylaw, the extensions have been granted for this individual to deal with this, and barring changing the bylaw, I'm not up for an extension, but that's my opinion. Council would like to make any motions again, you're more than welcome to. Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Mayor Snodgrass. Our bylaws are based on complaints received from the public. So if there's 20 some people in High River that are raising pigeons, they have obviously got no complaints from people around them. What is to stop this person from moving his pigeons to another pigeon person's property in High River, and or out just outside of High River to a portion of a farmer's field or something to that effect. There's alternatives for him to move the pigeons and still retain ownership.
And certainly the first complaint that we had received, they had transitioned within the 30 days. They had found a new home, don't know where that is, but they had complied with the letter of complaint and the order that we had issued them through municipal enforcement to move their pigeons. So it certainly can be done, and it can be done within the timeframes that we allocated outside of COVID.
They probably, the first complainant probably moved into his property.
Okay,
is there any action, Council?
I'm seeing no.
Okay.
Last piece is just council correspondence, Cold Lake letter. Read it, Carol. And nothing further?
Oh, I actually had a comment about that Cold Lake
Okay, go ahead.
letter. I was just actually going to make a motion that the town of High River actually writes a similar letter in support of that, because I was thinking of back to 2013 with the flood and the RCMP, taking guns and whatnot. And I just thought, reading Cold Lake's letter, as well as doing my own research, I don't agree with what the federal government did by order in council. And I don't feel it's respecting, I think it's penalizing legal gun owners. And I don't see a decrease in crime. So I thought that the mayor of Cold Lake really articulated that well. And I thought the more municipalities get involved to petition against it, there might be some traction. So that would be my suggestion.
Okay, Chris, there's no speed issues with this one. So could we bring that back to the next council meeting?
We can bring it back.
Resolution and discussion.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks, Carol. Nothing further. Meeting adjourned at 6:18 p.m. Good meeting, council. Take care. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.